The debt collector's bargain. They say every woman has a price. Mine was paid by my own father, handed over like damaged goods to settle a debt I never owed. One moment I was invisible, cast aside by a husband who needed an heir I couldn't give him. The next, I was currency. Property. A sacrifice dragged into the shadows of Manhattan's most feared crime lord. But in Victor Calderon's world of monsters and secrets, I discovered something unexpected. The broken pieces of myself might be exactly what's needed to shatter a curse no one else could break. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The apartment smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Alara had learned to recognize that particular combination over the past 6 months, ever since Marcus walked out, leaving nothing but divorce papers and a note that said, "I deserve a real family." She stood at the kitchen counter now, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, staring at water stains on the ceiling that looked like accusatory faces. "Alara, did you pick up milk?" Her younger sister Riley's voice cut through from the bedroom they shared, the one with the door that didn't close all the way. "Couldn't afford it?" Alara's voice came out flat. She'd stopped apologizing for things like that weeks ago. "There's powdered stuff in the cabinet." Riley appeared in the doorway, 17 and still believing the world would eventually make sense. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her NYU acceptance letter clutched in one hand like a talisman. "Dad said he'd have money today. He promised." Alara didn't respond. Their father's promises had the lifespan of ice cream in July. Thomas Whitmore had once been a comptroller for a shipping company, the kind of man who wore ties and read the financial section. Now he was whatever came after that, something hollowed out, held together by betting slips and the conviction that his luck would turn on the next hand. It never did. "You should eat something," Alara said instead, reaching for the package of store-brand crackers. "I've got the late shift at the diner. Won't be back until—" The door exploded inward, not knocked, not opened. Exploded, the cheap wood splintering around the lock as 2 men filled the doorway like storm clouds taking human shape. The first one was massive, his neck thick as a fire hydrant, shoulders that had to turn sideways to fit through the frame. The second was smaller, leaner, with eyes that moved like a snake tracking prey. Thomas Whitmore. The lean one's voice was silk over razors. "We're here about the money." Riley made a sound, something between a gasp and a whimper. Alara moved without thinking, stepping between her sister and the men, the mug still clutched in her hand like the world's most pathetic weapon. "He's not here," she said. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that, even as her heart tried to jackhammer through her ribs. "Yeah?" The big one smiled. He had a gold tooth that caught the weak overhead light. "That's unfortunate, because Mr. Volkov doesn't really care about excuses anymore. Your daddy's been making promises for 3 months. We're done with promises." "How much?" The words came out before Alara could stop them. The lean man tilted his head, studying her with the interest of someone examining a particularly unusual insect. 73,000, plus interest, plus fees for our time and trouble. Call it an even 100. The number hit like a physical blow. Alara felt her knees go liquid. $100,000. Her father, that pathetic broken man, had somehow managed to bury them under 6 figures of debt to people who broke down doors in Queens at 9 in the morning. "We don't have that kind of money," Riley said from behind her, voice small. "We don't have any money." "We noticed." The lean man stepped further into the apartment, his shoes clicking against the worn linoleum. He looked around with the disdain of someone touring a landfill. "This place looks like it's worth about $12 and a subway token. So here's what's going to happen. I can get it." Alara heard herself say the words, watched the men's attention snap back to her. "Just give me time. I'll get you the money." The big one laughed, a sound like grinding gravel. "You? Lady, you're what? A waitress? You know how long it'd take you to scrape together 100 grand? You'd be dead before you made a dent." "Then what do you want?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The lean man's smile grew wider, and something cold slithered down Alara's spine. "Mr. Volkov is a practical man," he said. "He understands that sometimes cash isn't the only currency worth having. He's got business associates, powerful men with particular tastes, men who pay well for His eyes traveled down Ilara's body, then slid past her to Riley. Fresh acquisitions. No. The word came out like a gunshot. Absolutely not. Wasn't asking your permission, sweetheart. Your father put up collateral when he took the loan. His family. That means you and the kid belong to us until the debt's clear. Riley grabbed Ilara's arm. Ellie, the apartment door opened again. Thomas Whitmore stumbled through, and Ilara felt something inside her chest crack and crumble. Her father looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair greasy, his shirt buttoned wrong, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. But it was the look on his face that destroyed her. Not surprise at the men in his apartment. Not confusion. Recognition. I told you I needed more time, Thomas said to the lean man, his voice reedy with panic. I've got a sure thing coming through next week. Big race at Belmont. I've got inside information. I just need... Mr. Whitmore. The lean man's voice cut through Thomas's babbling like a knife through wet paper. We're past that. We're at the collection phase now. Thomas's eyes darted to his daughter's. Something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe, or the ghost of whatever he'd been before the gambling ate him alive. But when he spoke, the words came out like he'd been practicing them. Take Ilara. The silence that followed could have swallowed the world. Dad? Riley's voice broke on the word. Thomas wouldn't look at either of them. He stared at the wall above the lean man's shoulder, his jaw working. Ilara's the older one. She's already been married. She knows how things work. Riley's just a kid. She's got college ahead of her. She's got potential. You piece of shit. Ilara's voice came out so calm it surprised her. No screaming, no crying, just a flat statement of fact. You're actually doing this. I don't have a choice. Now Thomas looked at her, and his eyes were wet. They'll take both of you if I don't choose. At least this way Riley has a chance. She can still... Yeah, she'll have a great life knowing her father sold her sister like a used car. Ilara laughed, and the sound felt like breaking glass in her throat. That'll look great on her therapy bills. The big man moved then, his hand closing around Ilara's upper arm with bruising force. She didn't fight. What would be the point? Riley was screaming something. Thomas was making noises that might have been words, but Ilara just stood there, feeling the last threads of whatever held her to this family snap one by one. Wait. The lean man held up a hand. The big one stopped dragging Ilara toward the door. Mr. Whitmore, let me make sure I understand. You're offering your daughter, this one specifically, in exchange for canceling the debt? Thomas nodded so hard Ilara thought his neck might snap. And you understand what you're actually offering. Not just labor, not just service. You understand the nature of Mr. Volkov's business associates and what they require? Another nod. Smaller this time. Say it out loud, the lean man commanded. I want to hear you say exactly what you're selling. Thomas's mouth opened and closed twice before sound came out. I'm giving you Ilara, to do whatever you need to do, to settle the debt. And why Ilara specifically? Why not the younger one? Because... Thomas swallowed hard, and Ilara watched him do it. Watched him choose the words that would destroy whatever microscopic shred of their relationship might have survived. Because Ilara's already damaged. Her husband left her because she can't have kids. She's barren. She's used up. But Riley's still got her whole life ahead of her. She's perfect. She deserves... Okay. Ilara's voice cut it through her father's justifications like a blade. Okay, I'll go. Everyone stopped. Riley was crying, still clutching Ilara's other arm. The lean man raised an eyebrow. You'll come willingly? Do I have a choice? Not really, but cooperation makes things easier. Ilara looked at her sister, really looked at her. Riley with her acceptance letter and her dreams and her stupid, stubborn belief that hard work and good grades would build a life that mattered. Someone in this family should get to keep that belief intact for a while longer. Let me get my coat, Ilara said. The lean man nodded to the big one, who released her arm. Ilara walked to the small closet by the door, moving carefully, like any sudden movement might shatter the strange calm that had settled over her. She pulled out her winter coat, a thrift store find, navy blue with buttons that didn't quite match, and shrugged it on. Riley grabbed her hand. Ellie, you can't... We'll figure something else out. There's nothing to figure out. Ilara squeezed her sister's fingers once, hard enough to hurt. You're going to go to NYU. You're going to study whatever you want and become whoever you're supposed to be. Don't let this define you. How can it not? They're taking you because of Dad's gambling, because he chose me over you, because I'm choosing this. Alara pulled her hand free, turned to face the two men who'd come to collect her like a repo man claiming a car. I'm choosing to protect you. That's different. Remember that. The lean man made an approving sound. Touching. Let's go. They walked her down 4 flights of stairs, past Mrs. Chen's apartment, where the smell of dumplings usually made her stomach growl, past the broken mailboxes in the lobby that had been broken since she was 12. The morning sun hit her face as they stepped outside, too bright, too normal for what was happening. A black town car idled at the curb, windows tinted so dark they looked like sheets of obsidian. The big man opened the rear door. Get in. Alara climbed inside. The leather seats were soft, expensive, the kind of thing she'd only experienced in magazines and movies. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like a vault ceiling. She was alone in the back. The lean man took the passenger seat. The big one drove. They pulled away from the curb, and Alara didn't look back. Couldn't. If she looked back and saw Riley standing in the window of their 4th-floor apartment, she might actually break. First time in Manhattan? The lean man asked conversationally, like they were friends heading to brunch. Alara didn't answer. Strong silent type, that's fine. Mr. Calderon appreciates discretion. That name, Calderon, landed with weight. Even in Queens, even in her small, contained life of double shifts and overdue bills, she'd heard whispers about Victor Calderon, the man who owned half of Manhattan's underground, who controlled enterprises that ranged from legitimate real estate to things that happen in basements and back rooms. A ghost story that businessmen told to scare each other straight. And now she was being delivered to his door like Chinese takeout. The city changed as they drove. Queens gave way to neighborhoods with trees, then to glass towers that punched holes in the sky, then to streets where the buildings looked like they'd been standing since robber barons walked the earth. Old money, old power. The car turned onto a tree-lined street that belonged in a movie about Gilded Age Manhattan. Mansion facades stretched like a row of teeth, each one worth more than everyone Alara had ever known would earn in their combined lifetimes. The car slowed in front of an iron gate that looked like it had been forged to keep out armies. The gate swung open silently. They drove up a circular driveway to a house, no, an estate, that made Alara's brain stutter. Gray stone, ivy climbing like deliberate decoration, windows that reflected the sky like dark mirrors. It looked like somewhere presidents might visit, somewhere history got written, somewhere a girl from Queens had absolutely no business being. The car stopped. The big man opened her door. Out. Alara stepped onto gravel that crunched under her second-hand boots. The front door of the mansion was already opening, revealing a woman in her 50s wearing what looked like a uniform, black dress, white apron, hair pulled back so tight it probably hurt. Her face could have been carved from granite. This her? The woman's voice matched her expression, cold, evaluating. Fresh delivery, the lean man confirmed. He was already back in the passenger seat. Mr. Calderon's expecting her. The woman nodded. The car pulled away, tires spitting gravel, leaving Alara standing alone with this stranger in front of a mansion that looked like it ate people like her for breakfast. Name? Alara Whitmore. Forget that name. In this house, you're nobody until you earn the right to be somebody. Follow me. The woman turned and walked inside. Alara followed because there was literally nothing else to do. The entrance hall made her stop breathing for a second. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than her entire apartment building, stairs that curved up into shadows, art on the walls that looked old and important and completely wasted on someone who'd never been inside a museum. But it was cold. Despite the obvious wealth, despite the beautiful things arranged like museum pieces, the whole place felt frozen, like a mausoleum decorated by someone with impeccable taste and no soul. Through here. They walked down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, then descended a set of stairs that took them below ground level. The temperature dropped with each step. The decor changed too, less marble and art, more concrete and industrial lighting. They were in the basement, Alara realized. Or a basement. This place probably had several. The woman pushed open a heavy door, and sound hit Alara like a wave, crying, whispering, the shuffle of feet on concrete, the smell of unwashed bodies and fear. The room beyond was huge, some kind of converted storage space or wine cellar, and it was full of women. Alara's count stopped at 15 before her brain refused to keep tracking. They ranged from teenagers who looked younger than Riley to women in their 30s, all wearing the same expression of hollow-eyed terror. Some sat on thin mattresses scattered across the floor. Others stood in small groups, talking in whispers. All of them looked at Alara when she entered, measuring her with the cold calculation of people who'd learned that everyone was competition for survival. "New arrival," the granite-faced woman announced to the room. "Process her." Two women approached, one maybe 25 with Asian features and a scar that cut through her left eyebrow, the other older, Latina, with eyes that had stopped reflecting anything but exhaustion. "Come on," the scarred one said, not unkindly. "You're going to want to get this part over with." They led Alara to a corner where a tattered curtain hung from a wire, creating the illusion of privacy. Behind it sat a metal folding chair and a cardboard box full of what looked like uniforms, gray dresses, all identical, all sized for nobody in particular. "Strip," the older woman said. "Everything. Clothes, jewelry, anything personal. It all goes in this bag." She held up a plastic garbage bag like she'd done this 1,000 times before. "Why?" Alara's hands didn't move to her coat buttons. "Because in this place you don't own anything, not even yourself. The sooner you accept that, the easier this gets." The scarred woman's voice was flat, reciting facts. "They'll inventory your belongings. If you earn privileges, you might get some of it back." "Probably not." Alara looked at the bag, at the identical gray dresses, at the two women who'd been where she was standing now, who'd crossed this same threshold from person to property. She started unbuttoning her coat. The process was quick and mechanical. Coat, sweater, jeans, socks, boots. Her bra was cheap and the underwire had been poking her for weeks. Her underwear had a hole in the elastic. Everything went into the bag. The older woman handed her one of the gray dresses, rough cotton that felt like sandpaper against her skin. "Shoes?" They gave her canvas slip-ons that were 2 sizes too big. "Now what?" "Now you wait," the scarred woman said. "They'll assign you to a work rotation. Laundry, kitchen, cleaning. You do what they tell you, when they tell you, or you get disciplined." "Disciplined how?" Neither woman answered. Their silence was more informative than words. Alara followed them back into the main room. Someone had already taken the mattress spot closest to the wall, apparently prime real estate in this nightmare. She ended up sitting on bare concrete near the door, her back against the cold wall, watching the other women watch her back. "First time?" A voice beside her. Alara turned to find a young woman with red hair and freckles that should have looked cheerful, but instead just emphasized how pale and drawn her face was. "Is it obvious?" "You're still making eye contact. Give it a few days." The redhead pulled her knees up to her chest. "I'm Sophie. Was. Maybe still am. Hard to tell anymore." "Alara." "Yeah, I heard. Welcome to Hell's waiting room." Sophie's laugh was bitter. "You know what you're here for?" "Debt collection, I guess. My father owed money." "Same. Well, similar. My boyfriend borrowed from the wrong people. Didn't work out well for either of us." Sophie picked at a thread on her dress. "But that's just how we got here. What we're here for is different." "What do you mean?" Sophie looked at her with something like pity. "You really don't know. They didn't tell you." "Tell me what?" Before Sophie could answer, the heavy door opened again. The granite-faced woman entered, followed by 2 men in black suits who looked like they could bench press a Volkswagen. The room went silent so fast it felt like someone had hit a mute button. "Attention!" The woman's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Calderon has guests arriving tonight. We need selections for the following services. Kitchen staff, 6 women. Serving staff, 4 women. And..." She paused, her eyes scanning the room with predatory precision. 1 woman for special assignment. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Alara felt the women around her shrink back, making themselves smaller, less visible. Whatever special assignment meant, nobody wanted it. The woman's gaze landed on Alara. Held. "You, the new one. Stand up." Alara's legs moved before her brain caught up, muscle memory from a lifetime of following orders just to get through the day. She stood, feeling every eye in the room on her back. The woman walked closer, circling Alara like a buyer examining livestock. She grabbed Alara's chin, turning her face left and right, studying her features with clinical detachment. Age? 28. Previous experience? With what? The woman's eyes narrowed. Entertaining guests? Providing services of an intimate nature. Oh. No, Alara said. I was married. Before. That's it. Married? The woman released Alara's chin. Why aren't you anymore? The question felt like a knife slipping between ribs. He left me. Why? Because I can't have children. The words came out mechanical now, worn smooth from repetition. I'm infertile. He wanted a family. The woman made a considering sound. Unfortunate for your marriage. Convenient for us. At least we don't have to worry about complications. She stepped back, addressing the room. The new one gets the special assignment. The rest of you, kitchen and serving staff, you know who you are. Move. Women started rising, heading toward the door with the defeated shuffle of people who'd learned that resistance only made things worse. Sophie grabbed Alara's arm as she passed, squeezing once. Whatever happens, she whispered, don't fight. It's worse if you fight. Then she was gone, and Alara was alone with the granite-faced woman and the two human mountains in suits. Come with me. They went up, past the basement, past the main floor, up the grand staircase that probably featured in architectural magazines. The mansion seemed to grow darker as they climbed, despite the windows everywhere. Shadows pooled in corners. The air felt thicker. They stopped at a door at the end of a long hallway on the 3rd floor. The woman produced a key, unlocked it, and pushed it open. Inside. The room beyond was beautiful in the way that expensive hotels were beautiful, impersonal, perfectly decorated, completely cold. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in dark fabrics. Heavy curtains covered windows that probably looked out over manicured gardens. A bathroom door stood ajar, showing marble and gold fixtures. And in the corner, sitting in an armchair like a throne, was a woman in her 30s wearing a lab coat over business attire. She had a leather bag beside her, the kind doctors carried on house calls. Is this her? The doctor, had to be a doctor, stood up, studying Alara with professional detachment. Yes, verify she's clean and intact. Mr. Calderon's guest has specific requirements. The next 15 minutes ranked among the most humiliating of Alara's life. The doctor was efficient and thorough, performing an examination that stripped away any remaining illusions about bodily autonomy. Blood drawn, mouth swabbed, areas checked that made Alara's face burn with shame. Through it all, the granite-faced woman watched, making notes on a tablet. Finally, the doctor stepped back. She's healthy, no diseases, no substances in her system. Verification of infertility confirmed by previous medical records. She looked at Alara almost sympathetically. You're going to want to shower. There are clothes in the closet. Wear what's laid out on the bed. What's happening? Alara's voice came out smaller than she wanted. Where am I? What guest? The granite-faced woman actually smiled. It looked painful, like her face wasn't built for the expression. You've been selected for a very particular honor, girl. Mr. Calderon has a business associate who visits monthly. This associate has specific tastes, specific needs. You're going to fulfill them. And if I refuse, then you go back downstairs with the others and we select someone else. Probably that red-haired girl who seemed friendly with you. The woman's smile widened. Would you like her to take your place? Alara thought of Sophie, thought of Riley, probably sitting in their apartment right now, crying or screaming or both. Thought of Marcus, who'd walked away because she couldn't give him the perfect family he deserved. Thought of her father's face when he'd said, take Alara like he was offering up a damaged appliance. No, she said. I'll do it. Smart girl, shower, dress. Someone will come for you at sunset. Until then, the woman gestured around the beautiful empty room. This is yours. They left. The lock clicked behind them. Alara stood in the center of the room, still wearing the 2 big canvas shoes and the rough gray dress, and felt the last threads of her old life dissolve. She wasn't Alara Whitmore anymore. Wasn't a wife or a daughter or even really a person. She was inventory, property, a thing selected to fulfill someone's specific needs. The shower was hot, at least. She stood under the spray until her skin turned red, washing away the doctor's touch, the granite-faced woman's assessment, the memory of her father's voice saying she's already damaged. The bathroom had expensive soaps and shampoos, the kind she'd sometimes smell on wealthy customers at the diner. She used all of them, scrubbing until she felt raw and clean and something other than what she'd been when she walked through the door. The clothes laid out on the bed were simple but clearly expensive, a black dress and soft fabric that actually fit her properly, undergarments that didn't have holes, shoes that were her actual size. She put them on slowly, each piece feeling like a costume for a play she hadn't auditioned for. A knock at the door made her jump. "It's unlocked," she called out. A different woman entered this time, younger, maybe 30, with kind eyes that seemed out of place in this house. She carried a tray of food that made Alara's stomach growl, despite everything. "I'm Anna," the woman said, setting the tray on a side table. "I manage the household staff. I wanted to check on you before tonight." "What happens tonight?" Anna's kind eyes filled with something like sorrow. "The guest arrives at sunset. You'll be brought to the East Wing. There's a room there." She hesitated, choosing words carefully. "Where the meetings happen." "What kind of meetings?" "I don't know exactly. None of us do. The women who go there don't talk about it afterward. But they all survive the night, which is more than can be said for some other assignments in this house." That should have been comforting. It wasn't. "The guest," Alara's voice caught. "Is it Victor Calderon?" Anna's expression shuddered. "Mr. Calderon has many business associates. I can't speak to which one you'll be meeting, but I can tell you that if you cooperate, if you do what you're told, you'll be treated better than the women downstairs. You'll have this room, regular meals, some small freedoms." "In exchange for what?" "For telling stories." Alara blinked. "What?" "The guest requires entertainment. Stories, specifically. Each night, from sunset to sunrise. That's what the other women have done. They tell stories, and in return, they survive until morning." Anna moved toward the door. "Eat, rest. Someone will come for you when it's time." She left before Alara could ask the 1,000 questions suddenly screaming in her head. Stories? That was the specific requirement? Just stories? It felt like a trap. A lie. Nothing in this nightmare mansion was that simple, but her stomach didn't care about suspicion, and the food on the tray smelled incredible. Alara ate methodically, tasting nothing, fueling her body because not eating felt like giving up, and she wasn't ready to do that yet. The light outside the windows shifted from afternoon gold to evening amber to the deep blue of approaching night. Alara watched it happen, sitting on the edge of the expensive bed, wearing borrowed clothes in a borrowed room, waiting for sunset like it was a countdown to execution. When the knock came again, the sky outside was black. It's time. A different escort this time. One of the suit-wearing mountains from earlier. He didn't speak beyond those 2 words, just gestured for her to follow. They walked through corridors she didn't recognize, the mansion revealing itself as a maze designed to confuse and disorient. Finally, they stopped at a door that looked older than the others, made of dark wood carved with patterns that might have been decorative or might have been something else. The mountain knocked 3 times. "Enter." The voice from inside was male, cultured, with an accent Alara couldn't quite place. The door swung open. The room beyond was dark, not naturally dark, but deliberately so. Heavy curtains blocked what must have been windows. A single lamp in the far corner provided the only light, barely enough to see shapes and shadows. The furniture was sparse, a chair near the lamp, a small table beside it, and deeper in the shadows, something larger. A bed? A couch? Alara couldn't tell. "Come in, girl. Close the door behind you." Alara stepped inside. The door shut with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the dimness. She could make out the chair now, high-backed, ornate, facing away from her toward the deeper shadows. Closer. She walked forward until she was maybe 10 feet from the chair, close enough to see that someone sat in it. A figure outlined against the slight lamplight, but features obscured by darkness and positioning. They told you what's required? The voice was calm, almost gentle. Nothing like the granite-faced woman's cold commands or the debt collector's silk-wrapped threats. They said, "You want stories?" "Yes. From sunset to sunrise, you will tell me stories. Any kind, fables, myths, things you've read, things you've experienced. The content doesn't matter as much as your commitment to the task." A pause. "Can you do that?" "And if I can't? If I run out of stories?" "Then our arrangement ends and you return to the general population downstairs." The figure shifted slightly. "But I suspect you'd prefer to avoid that." "Why stories? Why not—" Alara stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Why not use you for more traditional purposes?" The voice held dark amusement. "Because stories are what I require. The women before you understood this, some better than others. The one who lasted longest managed 43 nights. The shortest lasted 3. What happened to them? Nothing violent, if that's your concern. When they could no longer provide what I needed, they were reassigned. Some to household duties, others sold to lesser enterprises. Their fates varied based on their skills and their compliance. Sold, like furniture, like cars. Do I have a choice? You chose to enter this room. Everything that follows is a consequence of that choice." The figure leaned forward slightly and Alara caught a glimpse of a hand, pale, long-fingered, resting on the arm of the chair. "Now, begin." Alara's mind went blank. Every story she'd ever heard, every book she'd read, every movie she'd watched, all of it evaporated like water on hot pavement. She stood in the darkness with a stranger demanding entertainment, and she had nothing. Then she thought of Riley, of the women downstairs, of Sophie saying it's worse if you fight. "Once," Alara began, her voice steadier than she felt, "there was a girl who lived in a small village at the foot of a mountain." She told the story of Red Riding Hood because it was the first thing that came to mind, changing details, adding descriptions, stretching what should have been a 5-minute tale into 20 minutes of wolves and grandmothers and woodsmen who arrived just in time. When she finished, the silence felt heavy. "Continue." So she did. Cinderella next, because apparently she was working through childhood classics. Then Sleeping Beauty, though she changed the prince to a wandering knight and added detail about the castle's architecture, the sleeping court, the way magic felt when it settled over stone. Hours passed. Alara's voice grew rough. She moved from fairy tales to Greek myths, Persephone and Hades, because at least that felt appropriate. Orpheus and Eurydice, the story of Icarus that her high school English teacher had loved. The figure in the chair never interrupted, never moved beyond the occasional shift of position, but somehow Alara knew it was listening, really listening, not just waiting for her to finish so it could dismiss her. When she ran out of myths, she started making things up. A story about a girl who could speak to birds, a tale about a kingdom where every lie created a flower and every truth made one wilt. She wove words into the darkness, filling the shadowed room with imaginary people doing imaginary things, and somewhere in the process, something strange happened. She forgot to be terrified. Not completely, the fear still lived in her chest, a constant weight. But it became background noise as she focused on the stories themselves, on making them interesting, on ensuring each one flowed into the next. She was describing a princess who'd been locked in a tower made of glass when the figure finally spoke. "Stop." Alara's voice cut off mid-sentence. She'd been talking for she didn't know how long. Her throat ached, her legs trembled from standing. "Sit." The figure gestured to a cushion on the floor that Alara hadn't noticed before. "You've earned a brief rest." She sank onto the cushion gratefully. Her entire body felt like overcooked pasta. "You have a gift for narrative," the figure said. "The way you build tension, how you transition between tales, it's instinctive." "I used to tell stories to my sister," Alara said without thinking. "When she was little, to help her sleep." "Tell me about your sister." It wasn't a request. It was a command, but somehow softer than before. "Riley, she's 17. Smart as hell, stubborn as anything. Just got accepted to NYU." Alara heard her voice catch. "She wants to study literature, become a professor maybe. She believes the world makes sense if you just work hard enough. And you? What do you believe? I believe the world is designed to chew up people like me and spit out the pieces. Silence. Then, continue your stories. You still have hours until sunrise. Alara pushed herself back to her feet, ignoring her protesting muscles, and started talking again. This time she told the story of a girl who married a man who promised her the world, but left her when she couldn't give him children. She didn't say it was her own story. Didn't have to. The truth leaked through every word. The figure listened without comment. As the night wore on, Alara's stories grew more personal. She talked about invisible women, about people who were valued only for what they could provide, about the cruelty of being measured and found wanting. She was mid-sentence in a story about a queen who turned herself to stone to escape feeling anything when light began creeping around the edges of the heavy curtains. "Dawn," the figure said, "you survived the night." Alara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the cushion, her body suddenly remembering how exhausted it was. "Tomorrow night, you'll return. Same time, same arrangement." The figure stood. Alara saw the movement more than the details, and walked deeper into the shadows. "You did well. Better than most." "What's your name?" The question escaped before Alara could stop it. A pause. Then, "Names are earned here. You haven't earned mine yet." A door she hadn't noticed opened somewhere in the darkness. Light spilled through, and the mountain in the suit appeared. "Take her back to her room. Ensure she has food and water. She's not to be disturbed until sunset." The mountain gestured for Alara to follow. She struggled to her feet, every muscle screaming, and walked toward the light on legs that barely functioned. At the threshold, she looked back. The room was too dark to see anything clearly, but she felt eyes on her. Watching. Measuring. Maybe, though this seemed impossible, appreciating. Then the door closed and she was back in the bright, normal hallway, being escorted to her beautiful, empty room like nothing extraordinary had just happened. Anna was waiting when Alara stumbled inside. She had food again, and water, and what looked like medicine for Alara's raw throat. "You made it," Anna said, and the relief in her voice was genuine. The first night is always the hardest. Alara took the water, drank half the glass in one go. "How many nights am I expected to do this?" "Until you can't anymore. Or until—" Anna stopped herself. "Until what?" "Until the arrangement changes. Sometimes it does. Not often, but sometimes." Anna moved toward the door. "Sleep now. You'll need your strength." Alara wanted to ask more questions, but sleep was already dragging her under. She collapsed onto the bed, still wearing the black dress, still wearing the shoes that fit properly, and fell into darkness that felt almost as deep as the room she'd just left. When she woke, the light outside suggested late afternoon. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed glass, but the medicine Anna left had helped. Food waited on the side table, real food, not the cheap stuff she'd lived on in Queens. She ate mechanically, her mind already spinning through possible stories for tonight. She had to last longer than 3 nights, had to prove she could provide what this mysterious guest needed. Because the alternative was going back downstairs, and she'd seen the hollow eyes of the women there. That was a death sentence, just slower than a bullet. The sunset came too fast and too slow at the same time. When the knock came, Alara was as ready as she could be, throat soothed with honey water, mind stocked with stories, body braced for another marathon of words in the dark. "It's time," the mountain said, and Alara followed him back to the shadowed room, back to the chair and the figure and the voice that commanded her to begin. The next 7 nights blurred together. Alara told every story she could remember, then invented new ones. She described worlds where magic was currency, where time ran backwards, where the dead could be bargained with for favors. She wove tales of revenge and redemption, of love found in unexpected places, of people who discovered they were stronger than they believed. The figure listened to all of it, never interrupted, never dismissed her, just listened. On the 8th night, something shifted. "Tonight," the figure said when Alara entered, "I want a different kind of story. I want truth, not fiction. Tell me about the day your husband left." Alara froze. "That's not... I don't... It's a command, not a request." So she did. She told the story of Marcus coming home from work early, his face already set in the expression of someone who'd made a hard decision. The envelope he'd handed her with divorce papers already filled out. The way he'd said, "I'm sorry, but I need a real family like that," was supposed to make it hurt less. "And how did you respond?" the figure asked. "I signed the papers. What else was I supposed to do? Fight for a man who saw me as defective?" Alara's voice was bitter. "I gave him what he wanted. Let him go find some woman whose body worked properly. Let him have his perfect life." "You blame yourself. I blame biology, and doctors who couldn't fix me, and a world that measures women by their ability to produce children." Alara laughed, sharp and ugly. "You want to know what's funny? My father used that same logic when he sold me to your people. She's already damaged, might as well get some use out of her." At least he was consistent. The silence that followed felt different, heavier somehow. "Tell me more," the figure said quietly. "Tell me about being invisible." So Alara did. She talked about working double shifts at a diner where customers looked through her like she was furniture, about sitting in waiting rooms at fertility clinics, feeling like a failure every time a test came back with the same answer. About the way her father stopped meeting her eyes after Marcus left, like her inability to keep a husband was somehow contagious. She talked until her voice broke, until tears were running down her face, until she was empty of everything except the raw, bleeding truth of what it felt like to be measured and found wanting over and over and over again. When dawn came, she could barely stand. "Tomorrow," the figure said, "we'll continue. You're beginning to understand what I actually need from you." Alara didn't understand at all, but she nodded anyway, too exhausted to argue, and let the mountain escort her back to her room. That day, Anna brought different food, comfort food, mac and cheese, like Riley used to make, chocolate that melted on Alara's tongue, tea that tasted like childhood. "You're doing better than anyone expected," Anna said. "Mr. Calderon is pleased." "The guest, you mean?" Anna's expression flickered, something quick and unreadable. "Yes, the guest." That night, Alara returned to the shadowed room and found something new waiting, a second cushion positioned across from the first. "Sit," the figure commanded. She sat. "Tonight we talk. No stories, just conversation. Tell me why you agreed to come here instead of fighting, because fighting would have meant my sister taking my place. Loyalty. Admirable. But there's more to it than that." Alara thought about lying, about giving some noble answer that made her sound heroic. Instead, she said, "Because at least here, I'm worth something. At least here, my inability to have children doesn't make me worthless. It makes me convenient. That's not much, but it's more than I had before." The figure leaned forward slightly, still mostly shadow, but Alara caught details. The cut of an expensive suit, a hand that moved with deliberate grace, the suggestion of a face she couldn't quite see. "You're smarter than you pretend to be," the figure said. "You understand the transactions that govern this world. I understand that everything has a price, including people, especially people." Alara pulled her knees up to her chest. "What I don't understand is why you need stories. Why not just use the women for whatever actually makes money? Why this elaborate setup? Because stories are how we understand ourselves, how we process the unprocessable, how we find meaning in chaos." The figure's voice dropped. "And because sometimes the most valuable thing a person can offer isn't their body, it's their perspective, their humanity." Pretty words from someone who bought me like furniture. "I didn't buy you. Mr. Calderon's organization did. I'm merely utilizing available resources." "That's a fancy way of saying you're complicit." The figure actually laughed. "Yes, I suppose it is." They talked until sunrise. Really talked, not the one-sided storytelling of previous nights. The figure asked questions about Alara's life before the mansion, about her dreams and disappointments, about what she'd wanted to be before reality got in the way. Alara found herself answering honestly, maybe because she was too tired to lie, maybe because something about the darkness made confession feel safe. As dawnlight started creeping around the curtains, the figure said, "Tomorrow night, I have a question for you. Think about your answer carefully." "What's the question?" "If you could leave this place right now, walk out the door with no consequences, would you?" Alara opened her mouth to say of course, then stopped, because the honest answer was more complicated than that. Where would she go? Back to Queens? To her father who'd sold her? Back to a life of invisibility and double shifts in studio apartments with water-stained ceilings? I'll think about it, she said instead. The mountain took her back to her room. Alara collapsed onto the bed, but sleep wouldn't come. The question circled in her head like a shark. Would she leave? Should she want to? And why did the figure's voice sound almost hopeful when asking? The answer came to Alara 3 days later, during her afternoon meal in the room that had somehow become hers. Anna had brought chicken soup that tasted homemade, and Alara was spooning it into her mouth mechanically when the realization hit her like cold water. No, she wouldn't leave. Not because the mansion was comfortable, though it was, infinitely more so than her old life. Not because she was afraid of what waited outside, though that fear existed, constant and low grade. She wouldn't leave because for the first time in years, someone was actually listening to her. Really listening. The figure in the shadows consumed her words like they mattered, like she mattered, and that attention felt more valuable than freedom, which was probably pathetic, definitely concerning, but true nonetheless. When the mountain came for her that evening, Alara was ready. She'd spent hours preparing her answer, rehearsing the exact words, trying to sound rational instead of desperate. The shadowed room looked the same as always, darkness broken only by the single lamp, the high-backed chair facing away, the cushions on the floor positioned for conversation. But something felt different tonight. The air held a charge, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Sit, the figure said. Alara lowered herself onto the cushion, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. You've had time to consider my question. If you could leave right now, walk out with no consequences, would you? No. The word came out steady. I wouldn't. Silence. Then, why? Because out there, I'm invisible. I'm the waitress people don't see, the ex-wife who failed at her one job, the daughter who wasn't worth protecting. Here, Alara swallowed hard. Here at least someone cares what I have to say, even if it's only because you need entertainment. That's more than I had before. That's a low bar for measuring worth. Yeah, well, I've learned to work with what I've got. The figure shifted in the chair and Alara caught a glimpse of something she hadn't seen before. The line of a jaw, the suggestion of dark hair. Not enough to form a complete picture, but more than the pure shadow of previous nights. Tell me something, the figure said. When your husband left, did you ever consider that perhaps he was the failure? That his inability to love you regardless of circumstance was his flaw, not yours? The question punched the air from Alara's lungs. That's not... People don't work that way. Marriage is about building a family. If I can't provide that, marriage is about partnership, building a life together. Children can be part of that, but they're not the definition of it. The figure's voice held an edge now, something sharp beneath the cultured tones. Your husband was a coward who abandoned you when you didn't meet his specific requirements. That speaks to his character, not yours. You don't know anything about it, don't I? I know about being measured and found wanting, about people seeing only what you lack instead of what you offer, about the particular cruelty of being deemed insufficient based on factors beyond your control. A pause. We're not so different, you and I, Alara laughed, bitter. Right. Except you're the one with power here. You're the one who gets to command women to tell you stories while they kneel on the floor. We're exactly the same. Fair point. The figure stood and Alara tensed, but it only moved to pour something from a decanter she hadn't noticed before. Would you like a drink? Actual question, not a command. What is it? Bourbon. Expensive, which I suppose is redundant in this house. Everything is expensive. Sure. Why not? The figure poured 2 glasses, then did something unexpected. It came closer, stepping into the sphere of lamplight just enough for Alara to see a hand extended toward her. A man's hand, long-fingered and pale, holding a crystal glass that probably cost more than her old apartment's monthly rent. She took it. Their fingers didn't touch, but it was close. The figure retreated back toward the chair, but didn't sit. Instead, it paced at the edge of the shadows, a restless energy suddenly filling the room. You want to know why I need the stories? The figure asked. The real reason? Yes. Because during the day, I'm something else. Something that doesn't get to have conversations, or hear about normal human experiences, or remember what it's like to care about small, beautiful things. The stories are my tether. They remind me that humanity exists beyond power and violence and the ugly transactions that govern this world. Alara sipped the bourbon. It burned going down, warm and harsh and somehow clarifying. What are you during the day? A monster, in the very literal sense. She should have laughed, should have dismissed it as metaphor or dramatic exaggeration. But something in the figure's voice stopped her, a rawness that sounded like truth being torn from unwilling lips. I don't understand. No, you wouldn't. How could you? The pacing continued, agitated now. Tell me a story, Alara. Tell me about monsters and the people who love them anyway. So she did. She told him Beauty and the Beast, because it felt obvious and on the nose, but also somehow exactly right. She described Belle's initial fear transforming into understanding, the beast's rage masking desperate loneliness, the way love grew in the spaces between captor and captive until the labels stopped meaning anything. Fairy tales, the figure said when she finished. Always such simple morality. Love conquers all. True beauty is within. The curse breaks and everyone lives happily ever after. You asked for a monster story. That's what you got. Tell me one that's real. Tell me about the monsters in your own life. Alara thought about her father, about Marcus, about the debt collectors who'd broken down her door. But those felt too easy, too external. So instead she said, the worst monster I ever knew was the voice in my own head, the one that agreed with everyone who said I was broken. That whispered I deserved to be abandoned because I couldn't perform the basic biological function that defines womanhood. That told me I should be grateful anyone wanted me at all, even when wanting me meant selling me to pay gambling debts. The pacing stopped. That voice still lives in your head. Yes. And you believe it? Most days, yeah, I do. The figure moved then, quick and deliberate, crossing into the lamplight fully for the first time. Alara's breath caught. He was beautiful. Devastatingly, impossibly beautiful, in the way that made her chest ache. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved by someone who understood exactly what desire looked like. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that promised both cruelty and softness, eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. He wore a suit that probably cost 5 figures, tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean frame. He looked maybe 35, maybe ageless, maybe like something that had never been entirely human, and he was staring at her with an intensity that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. Listen to me carefully, he said, his voice low and controlled. That voice in your head is lying. You're not broken. You're not insufficient. You are not worth less because your body works differently than expected. And any person, any institution, any system that measures your value that way deserves to burn. Alara couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. I know what it's like to be trapped in a body that won't cooperate, he continued, to have people see you as a thing instead of a person, to be valued only for what you can provide while everything you actually are gets ignored. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, close enough that she could see gold flecks in those dark eyes. You survived your father's betrayal, your husband's abandonment, being sold like property. You survived all of that and still have enough humanity left to tell beautiful stories in the dark. That's not broken. That's extraordinary. Why do you care? The question came out whispered. Because you remind me that extraordinary is possible. Because your stories are the only thing that makes the daylight hours bearable. Because... He stopped, something flickering across his perfect face. Because you're the first person in a very long time who treats me like I'm human, even though you have every reason not to. I don't even know your name. Victor. Victor Calderon. The name landed like a physical blow. Alara scrambled backward on the cushion, her bourbon sloshing dangerously close to spilling. The debt collector said, they work for you. Yes. Victor didn't move, staying crouched at her level. This is my organization, my mansion, my enterprise. And before you ask, yes, I knew who you were when they brought you here. I know every woman who enters this house and why. It's my business to know. You let your people sell women, traffic them. I run an empire built on violence and exploitation, I'm not going to insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise." His voice was flat now, matter of fact. "But I also maintain certain rules. No children. No one gets hurt beyond what's necessary for control. And women who cooperate get treated with a baseline of dignity. It's not much, but it's more than most organizations offer. That's supposed to make it okay? No, nothing makes it okay. But welcome to the world we actually live in, where power is the only currency that matters and morality is a luxury most people can't afford." Alara should have been afraid, should have been screaming or crying or trying to escape. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why did you choose me? For this? The stories?" Victor stood, moving back toward the shadows. "Because the woman who selected you noted in her report that you'd been deemed infertile, which meant you couldn't get pregnant, which meant I didn't have to worry about complications. And because something about your intake photograph suggested you'd be good at this. You looked like someone who'd been invisible for so long you'd learn to see everything. That's it? Clinical assessment of my usefulness? Initially, yes. But then you started talking and..." He paused. "You made the invisible visible. You described loneliness and rejection and the particular pain of being unwanted with such precision that it felt like you were reading my own thoughts back to me. That's when I realized you weren't just useful, you were necessary." The admission hung between them like smoke. "Tell me about the curse," Alara said quietly. "The real one, not the fairy tale version." Victor laughed, sharp and humorless. "You want the monster's origin story? Fine. My family has been bound to something for 6 generations. A bargain made by an ancestor who thought he could cheat death and instead chained his bloodline to darkness. Every male Calderon carries it, this thing inside us that isn't entirely human. During daylight hours, I maintain control. I look like this, think like this, function like a person. But from sunset to sunrise..." He stopped, his jaw clenching. "What happens at night?" Alara pressed. "I become what I actually am, something that shouldn't exist, something that feeds on fear and lives in shadows, and would destroy everything it touches if not carefully managed." Victor's hands curled into fists. "The stories help. They ground me, give me something human to focus on instead of the hunger. That's why I need them, why I need you. The other women, they left because they ran out of material, or because maintaining the facade became too exhausting, or because they saw what I actually look like at night and couldn't handle it anymore." He met her eyes across the shadows. "You haven't seen that part yet. The transformation. Maybe you won't. If you burn out before then, you'll be reassigned and someone else will take your place. And if I don't burn out, then we continue. Night after night. You tell me stories and remind me I'm human. I keep you safe and comfortable. We both get what we need. That's all this is? A transaction?" Something dangerous flickered across Victor's face. What else would it be? The question felt like a challenge. Alara set down her bourbon glass carefully, buying herself time to think. What else indeed? She was property in his house, entertainment for his curse, a resource being utilized. Except that didn't explain the way he'd defended her against her own self-hatred. Didn't explain the rawness in his voice when he talked about being trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but it feels like more than that. Feelings are dangerous in this world. Everything is dangerous in this world. At least feelings are honest." Victor stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Then he said, "Dawn is still hours away. Tell me another story. Something true this time. Tell me about the moment you realized your marriage was over." So Alara did. She described coming home to find Marcus's closet empty, half their shared possessions already gone. The note on the kitchen counter that said he'd filed papers and his lawyer would be in touch. The specific way her hands had shaken as she'd read the words irreconcilable differences and known it was code for "you're defective." "I threw up," she said, "right there in the kitchen. Just bent over the sink and lost everything in my stomach because my body understood what my brain couldn't process yet, that I'd been measured and found so fundamentally wanting that my husband couldn't even stay long enough to have a conversation about it." "Did you love him?" "I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of being chosen, of someone wanting me enough to promise forever." When he left, it wasn't him I mourned. It was the proof that I was worth choosing. And now, Victor asked quietly, do you still need that proof? I don't know what I need anymore. Everything I thought I understood about myself turned out to be wrong. Good. That means you're ready to discover what's actually true. They talked until dawn, conversation flowing easier than it had any right to. Victor asked about her childhood, her relationship with Riley, what she'd dreamed about before life taught her dreams were expensive. Alara asked about running a criminal empire, about the specific logistics of managing violence, about what it felt like to know you were feared by everyone who knew your name. When the first hint of light appeared around the curtains, Victor stood abruptly. You need to leave, now. What's wrong? Sunrise. The change is starting. You don't want to see this part. But Alara stayed where she was, watching as Victor's hands began to shake, as shadows seemed to gather around him like living things, as his perfect face contorted with something that looked like agony. Alara, leave. No. That's not a request, it's... His words cut off in a sound that was half gasp, half growl. The shadows thickened, writhing, and Alara caught a glimpse of something changing, his silhouette shifting, expanding, becoming something that didn't fit human proportions. The mountain in the suit crashed through the door, grabbed Alara's arm, and physically dragged her from the room. The last thing she saw was Victor collapsing to his knees, his suit tearing as his body twisted into something else, his face transforming into... The door slammed shut. Are you insane? The mountain, Alara realized she'd never learned his name, practically threw her into the hallway. When Mr. Calderon tells you to leave, you leave. What happens to him? None of your business. You're fed, you're clothed, you're treated better than anyone in your position has a right to expect. Don't push it. He escorted her back to her room with a grip that would definitely leave bruises. Anna was waiting inside, looking worried. What did you do? Anna asked the moment the door closed. I stayed too long. Saw something I wasn't supposed to see. The transformation? The beginning of it. What is he, Anna? What actually happens? Anna moved to the window, staring out at gardens bathed in early morning light. I've worked in this house for 12 years. I've seen 6 women rotate through your position. Only one ever saw Mr. Calderon's true form and lived to talk about it. What happened to her? She lasted 43 nights. Then she requested reassignment and got sent to manage one of his legitimate businesses upstate. She never came back, never spoke about what she'd seen, but she sent me a letter once, just 2 words. Stay kind. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. Anna turned from the window. Mr. Calderon is many things. A crime lord, a cursed man, a monster. But he's also the reason women in this house have rules protecting them. The reason we get medical care and food and aren't just used up and thrown away. He maintains some thin thread of humanity despite everything working against him. The question is, are you going to help him hold on to it, or are you going to run like the others? I don't want to run. Then you're either very brave or very stupid, possibly both. Anna headed for the door. Rest. You'll need your strength. And Alara, whatever you think you're starting to feel for him, don't. Men like Victor Calderon don't get happy endings. They get survival if they're lucky and destruction if they're not. The door closed, leaving Alara alone with her thoughts and the phantom memory of shadows gathering around Victor's collapsing form. She should be terrified, should be demanding reassignment or escape, or anything that didn't involve returning to that room night after night. Instead, she found herself counting the hours until sunset, wondering what Victor looked like in his true form, whether the monster was as lonely as the man. The answer came 3 nights later. Alara had fallen into a rhythm, sleeping during the day, eating when Anna brought food, preparing stories for the evening. Each night, Victor appeared in human form, asked her questions that cut deeper than she expected, listened to her answers like they contained secrets to the universe. They never talked about the morning she'd almost seen him transform, never acknowledged the growing weight of everything unsaid between them. Until the night Victor said, I want you to see. See what? What I actually am. The thing the curse makes me. You asked before and I deflected. But you've lasted longer than anyone except one other woman, and you've earned the right to know what you're dealing with. Alara's heart kicked against her ribs. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. When dawn comes, don't leave. Stay. Watch. And then decide if you can continue this arrangement knowing the full truth. The next few hours passed in a blur of stories Elara barely remembered telling. Her mind kept circling back to dawn, to transformation, to the question of what exactly Victor became when darkness released its hold. When the first light started creeping around the curtains, Victor stood from his chair. Last chance to leave. I'm staying. Don't say I didn't warn you. The change started slowly. Shadows that had seemed like tricks of light began moving independently, gathering around Victor like moths to a flame. His hands trembled, then spasmed, fingers lengthening into something between human and claw. His face contorted, bones shifting beneath skin, eyes bleeding from dark brown to pure black with no white at all. He fell to his knees, and the shadows consumed him completely. When they cleared, what remained wasn't human. The creature crouched where Victor had been was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with proportions that suggested human ancestry but twisted into nightmare shapes. Its skin looked like living shadow, darker than black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The face was vaguely Victor's. She could see echoes of his bone structure, but distorted, elongated, with a mouth that held too many teeth. But the eyes were the same, dark and aware and looking at her with the same intensity Victor always had. The creature made a sound, something between a growl and a sob. It turned away, hunching its shoulders like it could hide what it had become. Elara stood on shaking legs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get away from the monster that couldn't possibly be the man she'd been talking to for weeks. But she thought about Victor's voice saying, "You're extraordinary," about the way he'd listened to her stories like they were precious, about the loneliness that leaked through every word he spoke. She took a step forward. The creature's head whipped around, those black eyes going wide. "Victor?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The creature made another sound, this one almost like a question. "It's still you, isn't it? Under all that, you're still in there." A slow nod. Careful. Like any sudden movement might send her running. Elara took another step closer. The creature, Victor, stayed frozen, watching her approach with something that looked almost like fear. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "The transformation?" Another nod, more emphatic this time. "I'm sorry. I can't imagine how awful that must be." The creature's eyes closed. When they opened again, something wet tracked down its shadowed face. Tears, Elara realized. It was crying. She crossed the remaining distance and did something incredibly stupid. She reached out and touched its arm, his arm. The shadow skin felt cold and somehow insubstantial, like touching smoke that held weight. "You're still you," she said quietly. "Monster or man or whatever this is. You're still the person who listens to my stories, who told me I wasn't broken, who drinks expensive bourbon and paces when he's agitated. This doesn't change that." The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. Then, moving very carefully, it reached up and covered her hand with its own massive, clawed one. They stayed like that as full daylight flooded the room, as the creature's form began to shimmer and shift, as shadows peeled away to reveal human skin in normal proportions, and Victor's face emerging from the nightmare. He collapsed forward, and Elara caught him without thinking, both of them ending up on the floor in a tangle of exhausted limbs. "You stayed," Victor said, his voice raw. "You actually stayed." "Yeah, well, I've seen worse." He laughed, the sound breaking apart halfway through. "Liar?" "Okay, yeah, that was pretty horrible, but it was also you, and—" Elara stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "And I've started caring what happens to you, which is probably stupid and definitely complicated, but there it is." Victor pulled back enough to look at her, his human eyes searching her face. "You understand what you're saying, what it means?" "I understand that we're both trapped in bodies that don't cooperate, that we've both been measured and found wanting by people who didn't matter, that somehow, in this nightmare situation, we found something that feels almost like, don't." Victor's hand came up to cover her mouth gently. "Don't say it. Not yet. Not until you're sure." Elara pulled his hand away. "What if I'm already sure?" "Then you're insane, and I'm the worst kind of selfish for wanting this anyway." Wanting what? Instead of answering, Victor kissed her. It wasn't gentle or romantic or any of the things first kisses were supposed to be. It was desperate and messy and tasted like bourbon and truth. And Alara felt something crack open in her chest that had been sealed shut since Marcus left. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor said, "This changes everything. I know. I can't protect you if this becomes known. My enemies would use you against me. My organization would see you as weakness. We'd both be targets. Then we keep it secret. Alara, I'm already property in this house, already trapped. The only thing that makes it bearable is you. So either we do this, whatever this is, or we go back to pretending we're just captor and captive, and I don't think I can do that anymore." Victor stood, pulling her up with him. "You should rest. We both should. And tonight, when you come back..." He paused. "Tonight, everything changes. Be ready." The mountain escorted her back to her room, but his grip was gentler this time, almost respectful. Anna was waiting with food and questions Alara didn't know how to answer. How do you explain that you just watched a man transform into a nightmare creature, and instead of running, you'd touched him, that you'd kissed him, that you were pretty sure you were falling in love with Manhattan's most feared crime lord? "You saw," Anna said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. And I'm going back tonight." Anna's expression shifted through several emotions before landing on something like resignation. "Then you're braver than I thought. Or more damaged. Hard to tell which. Maybe both. Probably both." That evening, when the knock came, Alara was ready. She'd spent the day thinking about Victor's warning that everything would change, trying to imagine what that meant. More conversations, different arrangements, some new phase of this bizarre relationship they'd stumbled into. The mountain led her to the shadowed room, but when the door opened, Alara stopped short. The space had been completely transformed. The single lamp remained, but now candles filled the room. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, creating pools of warm light that pushed back the shadows. The cushions on the floor had been replaced with actual furniture. A couch, chairs, a small table set with food and wine. And Victor stood in the center of it all, wearing casual clothes instead of his usual suit, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. "What is this?" Alara asked. "An experiment in being human instead of transactions." Victor gestured to the couch. "Sit. Eat if you want. Tonight we're not captor and captive. We're just two people having a conversation." "That's not possible. Not really. Not with everything that's..." "I know, but we're going to pretend anyway. For a few hours, we're going to pretend we're normal people who met under normal circumstances and might actually have a chance at something real." Alara's throat went tight. "Victor, please, let me have this. Let us have this. One night where we're not defined by curses and debts and the ugliness we're both trapped in." So she sat, and they talked. Really talked. Not about monsters or magic or the darkness that hunted them both, but about small things. Favorite books and movies, childhood memories, the specific way New York smelled after rain, all the tiny details that made up a life beyond survival. Somewhere around midnight, Victor said, "Tell me what you'd do if you could have anything. Money, circumstances, none of it matters. What would you want?" Alara thought about Riley at NYU, about a life where her father hadn't gambled everything away, about being seen as whole instead of broken. "I'd want to matter," she said finally. "Not because of what I could provide or who wanted me, but just because I existed. I'd want to take up space in the world and have that be enough." "You already matter." "To who?" "To me." Victor reached across the small distance between them, taking her hand. "You matter to me more than anything has in a very long time. And I know that's dangerous and wrong and probably going to destroy us both, but it's true anyway." Alara squeezed his fingers. "What do we do about it?" "I don't know, but for tonight, we stop pretending this is just about stories and curses. Tonight, we acknowledge that something else is happening here, something that matters." They stayed up until dawn, talking and kissing and mapping the territory of this impossible thing growing between them. When the light started creeping in and Victor's hands began to shake with the approaching transformation, Alara didn't leave. She stayed through it, watching him collapse and change, sitting beside the shadow creature and talking until the shift completed and Victor emerged human and exhausted. "Same time tonight?" she asked as the mountain appeared to escort her back. "Same time," Victor confirmed. "Every night, for as long as you'll have me." As Alara walked back to her room, she thought about Anna's warning that men like Victor didn't get happy endings, about the impossibility of loving someone cursed and dangerous, about all the ways this could end in disaster. But she also thought about Victor's eyes, human and monster both, looking at her like she was precious, about being seen and chosen despite every flaw and failure, about mattering to someone who understood what it felt like to be deemed insufficient. Maybe happy endings were for other people, but this, whatever this was, felt like enough. For now, it felt like enough. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost like normalcy. Alara spent her days sleeping and thinking, her nights talking with Victor in the candlelit room that had become their sanctuary. They discussed everything and nothing, philosophy and childhood memories, the mechanics of running a criminal empire, and her favorite songs, the weight of inherited curses, and what it felt like to be invisible in a crowded room. And every dawn, she stayed through the transformation, watching Victor collapse and change, sitting beside the shadow creature until he returned to human form. Each time, it got a little easier. Not witnessing the pain, that never got easier, but accepting that both versions were him, equally real, equally deserving of care. But 3 weeks of stolen moments couldn't exist in a vacuum, not in a house built on violence and exploitation. Not when the man she was falling for controlled half of Manhattan's underworld. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. Alara was eating breakfast. Anna had brought fresh pastries that tasted like childhood, when raised voices erupted from somewhere below her room. Male voices, angry and sharp. She recognized one immediately, Victor's, though she'd never heard him sound that cold before. "I don't care what Volkov thinks he's owed. The terms were clear. He overstepped." "Mr. Calderon, with respect, Volkov's organization controls the ports. If we want to maintain our shipping routes, then we find different routes. What we don't do is compromise on the rules. No children. That's non-negotiable." A pause. Then another voice, oily and sycophantic. "It was just one girl, 12 years old, already on the streets. Nobody would have missed." The sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed through the walls. Someone cried out, "Get out!" Victor's voice could have frozen oceans. "And tell Volkov if he ever brings that proposal to me again, I'll personally gut him and leave his body in the Hudson. We clear?" Footsteps, a door slamming, then silence. Alara sat with a half-eaten pastry, turning to paste in her mouth, reminded with brutal clarity exactly who Victor was during daylight hours. Not just the man who kissed her like she mattered. The crime lord who hit subordinates and threatened to gut people and ran an organization that trafficked women. The fact that he'd drawn a line at children didn't make him noble. It just made him slightly less monstrous than he could have been. Anna appeared in the doorway, looking troubled. "You heard that?" "Hard not to. Mr. Calderon maintains certain principles. They're not conventional morality, but they're consistent. That matters in this world." "Does it? Does it really matter if he draws lines in sand while building castles out of human suffering?" Anna's expression hardened. "You think you're the first person to struggle with what he is? To want to see him as just a man instead of everything else? You're not. But here's what you need to understand. Victor Calderon keeps hundreds of people alive who would die if someone crueler took his place. He maintains order in chaos. He prevents the worst excesses even while participating in terrible things. That's not redemption, but it's not nothing either. That's not good enough. Then leave. Request reassignment. Walk away." Anna's voice gentled. "But I think you won't. Because you've seen what's underneath all the violence and power. You've seen him vulnerable. And now you can't unsee it." She was right. Alara hated that she was right. That night, Victor was waiting in their usual room, but the candles weren't lit. He sat in near darkness, still wearing the tailored suit that marked him as the crime lord instead of just the man. "You heard this morning?" he said when Alara entered. Not a question. "Yes." "And now you're wondering what you've gotten yourself into, whether caring about someone like me makes you complicit in everything I do." "Honestly? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm wondering." Victor stood, moving to pour bourbon with hands that weren't quite steady. I could apologize, tell you that I'm trapped by circumstances, that I inherited this empire and didn't choose it, that I'm doing the best I can within an impossible situation. All of that would be true. But it would also be bullshit justification for the fact that I profit from human misery. Then why do it? Why not walk away? Because if I walk away, someone worse takes over. Someone who doesn't care about rules or limits or treating people with even baseline dignity. And because this curse, he gestured at himself, at the human form that wouldn't last past sunrise, requires resources to manage, medical care, secure locations, people loyal enough to keep secrets. That doesn't come cheap. So you sell women to pay for it? Yes. The admission landed flat. I sell women. I move drugs. I facilitate violence and corruption and every ugly thing that makes this city run. I am not a good man, Alara. I've never pretended to be. But you're good to me. That's different. Is it? Or is that just the excuse we're both using to pretend this isn't completely insane? Victor set down his glass with enough force to crack the crystal. What do you want me to say? That I'll change? That loving you will somehow transform me into someone decent? That's not how this works. I am what I am, monster during the day in ways that have nothing to do with the curse, and monster at night in ways I can't control. The only choice is whether you can accept that or not. The word loving hung in the air between them like smoke. You said loving, Alara pointed out quietly. Victor's jaw clenched. I did. You meant it? Unfortunately, yes. Which is why you should probably run. Because men like me don't get to keep the things we love. We destroy them. It's what we do. Alara crossed the space between them, forcing Victor to look at her. I'm already destroyed. Remember? That's how I ended up here. So maybe we skip the part where you try to protect me from yourself and just... She stopped, searching for the right words. Just let me decide what I can handle. And what can you handle? I don't know yet, but I know I'm not ready to walk away, even knowing what you are, what you do. Victor pulled her against him, his forehead resting against hers. You're going to regret this. We both are. Probably. But at least we'll regret it together. They didn't talk much that night. Didn't need to. They sat tangled together on the couch while Alara read aloud from a book of poetry Anna had brought her, Victor's fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm, both of them pretending they had more time than they did. When dawn came and the transformation started, Alara held him through it, whispering the poetry even as his body twisted and changed beneath her hands. The shadow creature that emerged curled around her protectively, making sounds that might have been contentment, and Alara let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe they could make this work. The second crack appeared 5 days later. Alara was walking back from the bathroom. She'd been granted limited freedom to move around the third floor during daylight hours. When she heard crying, real crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. She followed the sound to a door she'd never noticed before, slightly ajar. Inside, she found Sophie, the red-headed girl from her first day in the basement, sitting on a bed identical to Alara's and sobbing into her hands. Sophie? The girl's head snapped up, eyes red and swollen. Alara, sorry, I didn't... They said I could have this room, that I'd earned it, but I didn't realize you were... It's okay. What happened? Sophie laughed, wet and bitter. What do you think happened? I got upgraded, served at one of Mr. Calderon's dinner parties, smiled pretty, didn't make any mistakes. So now I get a real room instead of a mattress on the floor. Lucky me. That's good, isn't it? Better than downstairs? Sure, until they decide I'm useful for something else. Or until I age out. Or until I stop being compliant. Sophie wiped her eyes viciously. You know what the worst part is? I'm grateful. I actually feel thankful for a bed and regular meals and not being hurt every day. That's what this place does to you. It makes you grateful for the bare minimum of human decency. Alara sat beside her on the bed, thinking about her own room, her own meals, the protection Victor afforded her. Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you? Because word is you've got special treatment. That you're sleeping in Mr. Calderon's rooms, that you're... Sophie stopped herself. Sorry, that's not fair. You're trapped here same as me. Am I, though? Trapped, I mean? Or am I just choosing to stay because it's easier than facing what's outside? The question lingered between them. Sophie reached over and squeezed Alara's hand. I heard you're different than the others. That you talk to him like a person instead of a monster. That he actually listens. Is that true? Sometimes. When he's not being exactly what everyone thinks he is. Must be nice. Having someone see you is worth listening to. Sophie's voice cracked. I haven't had that since before my boyfriend got us into this mess. I'm just furniture now. Pretty furniture that serves drinks and smiles on command. You're not furniture. You're... Don't. Sophie stood abruptly. Don't give me the pep talk about how I'm still a person with value. I know what I am. What we all are. We're commodities. The only difference is some of us are worth more than others, and you're worth more because he decided you are. That's all that matters in here. She left before Alara could respond, the door closing with a soft click that felt heavier than a slam. Alara sat alone in Sophie's new room, staring at the bed that was identical to her own, thinking about the women still downstairs on mattresses on concrete floors, about the casual cruelty of a system where a bed and regular meals counted as privilege, about the fact that Victor maintained this system, profited from it, even while maintaining his careful rules and limits. That night, she brought it up. Tell me about the women downstairs, the ones who aren't selected for special assignments. What happens to them? Victor's expression shuddered. They work, kitchen, cleaning, laundry. The ones who prove reliable get better assignments. The ones who don't, he stopped. The ones who don't get sold to someone else? Yes. And you're okay with that? With treating people like they're interchangeable parts? I'm not okay with any of it. But I'm also not willing to blow up my entire organization over moral qualms that won't change the fundamental reality. If I shut down tomorrow, 5 other operations would fight to absorb my territory. Those operations have no rules, no limits. The women would be worse off, not better. That's convenient logic. It's true logic. Victor leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. You want me to feel guilty? I do. Every single day. You want me to change everything because it's the right thing to do? I can't. Because the second I show that kind of weakness, I'm dead, and everyone depending on me, including you, goes down with me. So we just accept it? The suffering, the exploitation, all of it? We accept that the world is ugly and our choices are limited, and sometimes the best we can do is minimize harm rather than eliminate it entirely. He reached for her hand. I know that's not the answer you want, but it's the only honest one I have. Alara pulled her hand away. I met Sophie today. She was crying because she was grateful for a bed. Grateful. That's what this place does to people. It makes them so desperate that basic humanity feels like winning the lottery. I know. And it doesn't bother you? It bothers me every single day. But what bothers me more is the thought of what would happen to Sophie and women like her if someone without my limitations took control. At least here, they're not being beaten for sport. They're not being killed when they're no longer useful. They have a chance at survival. That's a pretty low bar for measuring success. Welcome to my world, where the bars are always low and the victories are measured in degrees of suffering rather than actual happiness. They didn't make love that night, didn't kiss, just sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them feeling like a chasm neither knew how to cross. When dawn came and the transformation began, Alara almost left. Almost walked out and requested reassignment and let Victor face the change alone. But at the last second, she stayed. Because beneath the crime lord and the impossible circumstances and all the moral complexity she couldn't reconcile, he was still the man who'd called her extraordinary, who'd made her feel seen for the first time in years. That had to count for something. The shadow creature emerged from the transformation and immediately turned away, hunching its shoulders like it expected her to be gone. When Alara touched its arm, his arm, the creature flinched. I'm still here, she said quietly. The creature made a sound like a question. Because I don't know how not to be. Even when I should. Even when it would be smarter to leave. They sat together until Victor emerged human and exhausted, neither of them speaking, both of them aware that something had shifted between them. Not broken, exactly. Just complicated in ways that felt impossible to untangle. The third crack appeared 2 weeks later, and it was the one that changed everything. Alara had been granted permission to walk in the mansion's gardens during daylight hours, a privilege Victor had arranged after she'd mentioned missing the sun. She was sitting on a stone bench near a fountain, reading and soaking in the weak November light, when she heard voices approaching. Incredibly stupid idea. You realize that, right? I realize you're being dramatic. The Volkov situation has been brewing for months. We need to show strength. Alara recognized the second voice as Victor's, though it held none of the warmth she was used to. This was Victor the crime lord, cool and calculating. Showing strength doesn't require throwing a gala and inviting half the city's criminal elite. That's showing off. The first voice belonged to someone Alara didn't recognize, male, older, with the crisp diction of someone who'd gone to expensive schools. The gala serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates that we're not intimidated. It provides neutral ground for negotiations. And it gives me the opportunity to announce my engagement. Alara's heart stopped. Engagement? The older man sounded as shocked as Alara felt. To who? Catherine Volkov, Gregor's daughter. It's a strategic alliance that solves several problems at once. You can't be serious. Catherine is beautiful, well-connected, and the key to securing a permanent truce with her father's organization. Yes, I'm aware of what she is. That's exactly why it works. The voices moved past Alara's bench, neither man noticing her sitting frozen among the carefully manicured hedges. She watched Victor walk by. Impeccable suit, perfect posture, every inch the powerful crime lord, and felt something crack open in her chest. He was getting married. To someone else. Someone strategic and useful, and definitely not a broken waitress from Queens who couldn't give him children or connections or anything except stories in the dark. Alara sat in the garden long after the voices faded, staring at the fountain and trying to remember how to breathe. Of course he was getting married to someone appropriate. Of course their midnight conversations and stolen kisses didn't mean he'd upend his entire life for her. She was a convenience, a comfort, maybe even genuine affection, but she wasn't the future. She'd never been the future. She should have known better. She did know better, but somehow she'd let herself believe anyway. When Anna came to collect her for the evening, Alara's face must have given something away because the older woman's expression immediately filled with concern. What happened? When's the gala? The one where Victor announces his engagement. Anna's face fell. You heard about that. Is it true? Yes. It's been in the works for weeks, a strategic alliance with the Volkov family. I assumed Victor would tell you himself. Why would he? I'm just the entertainment. The woman who tells him stories so he doesn't completely lose his mind. That doesn't exactly come with disclosure rights about his personal life. Alara, so don't. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. Alara stood, brushing off her dress with hands that shook. When is it? The gala? Saturday night, 3 days from now. 3 days. 72 hours until Victor stood in front of Manhattan's criminal elite and promised himself to someone who actually mattered. I want to go, Alara heard herself say. Anna blinked. What? The gala. I want to attend. Can you arrange that? Absolutely not. You're not cleared for that kind of event. And even if you were, it would be incredibly dangerous. I don't care. I want to see it. I want to watch him do it. Alara met Anna's eyes. Please. You've been kind to me since I got here. Do this one thing. Anna studied her for a long moment. You'll regret it, seeing him with her. Watching him perform for the crowd. It's not going to give you the closure you think it will. Probably not, but I need to see it anyway. That evening, when the knock came to take Alara to Victor's room, she didn't answer. She sat on her bed with the lights off, staring at the wall, and ignored the increasingly insistent knocking. Eventually it stopped. She heard voices in the hallway, the mountain asking what he should do, Anna's response too quiet to make out. Then silence. Alara waited for relief, for the satisfaction of denying Victor something he wanted. Instead, she just felt hollow. Around midnight, her door opened without knocking. Victor stood in the doorway, still in his suit, looking disheveled in a way she'd never seen during daylight hours. You didn't come. No. Why? Alara laughed, sharp and ugly. Because I heard about your engagement. Because I realized I'm an idiot who forgot what I actually am to you. Because I needed to remember that this, she gestured between them, was never real. Just something to pass the time until you found someone actually worth keeping. Victor's face went carefully blank. You think Catherine means something to me? I think she means enough that you're marrying her. That seems pretty significant. It's a business arrangement, a strategic alliance. It has nothing to do with... He stopped. With what? With us? There is no us, Victor. There's you, the crime lord with a curse and an empire to maintain. And there's me, the broken woman you keep around for entertainment. Those two things don't add up to anything that survives outside this room. You don't believe that. I have to believe that. Because the alternative is admitting I fell in love with someone who was never going to choose me, and I can't... Ilara's voice cracked. I can't survive that again. I already did it once with Marcus. I won't do it again. Victor crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing her shoulders. You think I want this marriage? You think I want to tie myself to a woman I barely know for the sake of territorial negotiations? The only reason I'm doing it is because refusing would destabilize everything. People would die, Ilara. Not metaphorically. Actually die. Including possibly you. So you're doing it to protect me? How noble. I'm doing it because I don't have a choice. Because in my world, personal happiness is a luxury I can't afford. Because he pulled her against him, his voice dropping to something raw and desperate. Because even if I wanted to marry you instead, I couldn't. My organization would never accept it. The other families would see it as weakness. We'd both end up dead before the honeymoon. Then what are we doing? What is this? This is me being selfish, taking something I want even though I know it's temporary, even though I know it's going to hurt us both. Victor's hands came up to frame her face. I love you. I know I have no right to. I know it doesn't change anything about the engagement or the gala or the future, but it's true anyway. You're the first person in a decade who's made me feel human, who's looked at both versions of me and not flinched, and I'm not strong enough to walk away from that. You love me, but you're marrying someone else. Yes. That's not enough, Victor. Love without action is just words. I know, and I'm asking you to accept it anyway, to keep doing this, these nights, these conversations, even knowing where it leads, even knowing I can't give you the future you deserve. His forehead pressed against hers. I know I'm a bastard for asking. I know it's unfair, but I'm asking anyway. Ilara should have said no, should have demanded he figure out a way to actually choose her or let her go. Should have had more self-respect than to accept being the secret while someone else got the ring and the public commitment. Instead, she kissed him, hard and angry and full of all the things she couldn't say out loud. Victor kissed her back with equal desperation, both of them aware they were clinging to something that was already disintegrating. When they broke apart, Ilara said, I'm going to the gala. Anna's arranging it. Victor's expression went dark. No, absolutely not. It's not a request. Ilara, listen to me. That event will be full of people who would kill you just to hurt me. Who would see you as a weakness to exploit. You cannot... I need to see it. I need to watch you choose her, even if it's just for show, so I can stop lying to myself about what this is. And what is it? Temporary. Like you said. Something we both know won't last, but we're too scared to end. Ilara stepped back, putting physical distance between them. Go. You're still supposed to be the crime lord, and the crime lord doesn't chase after his entertainment when she skips a night. People will notice. Victor looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he said, I can't protect you at the gala. If you attend, you're on your own. I'm always on my own. That's kind of my thing. He left without another word, the door closing with a finality that felt like foreshadowing. The next 2 days crawled past. Ilara didn't go to Victor's room, and he didn't come to hers. Anna brought news that she'd secured Ilara a position as serving staff at the gala. It was the safest way to get her in without raising questions. She'd be invisible, just another woman in a uniform carrying champagne, which was exactly what Ilara wanted. Saturday arrived with gray skies that threatened snow. Anna brought a server's uniform that fit properly and began coaching Ilara on how to move through the crowd without drawing attention. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact with the guests. If anyone speaks to you, respond minimally and move on. These people... Anna's expression was grim. They're the worst humanity has to offer. Predators and expensive clothes. Don't give them any reason to notice you. What about Victor? Especially not him. If people realize you're connected, you become a target. And Catherine's father, Gregor Volkov, he's not a man who tolerates competition. He sees everything as a threat to be neutralized. Alara nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. She was about to walk into a room full of criminals and pretend to be furniture, while watching the man she loved announce his engagement to someone else. This was either the bravest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. Possibly both. The gala was being held in the mansion's ballroom, a space Alara hadn't even known existed. When she followed the other servers through the service entrance that evening, she stopped breathing for a second. The room looked like something from a movie about old money elegance. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, walls hung with art that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. And it was full of monsters wearing designer suits and couture gowns. Alara grabbed a tray of champagne flutes and started circulating, keeping her head down like Anna had instructed. She listened to snatches of conversation as she moved, discussions of territory and shipments and people who'd disappeared recently. Everyone spoke in code, but the meaning was clear. These were the people who made the city's darkness possible. And Victor controlled all of them. She caught her first glimpse of him an hour into the event. He stood near the far end of the ballroom, surrounded by men in expensive suits who laughed too loud at his quiet comments. He looked like power personified. Tailored tuxedo, perfect posture, the kind of presence that made other people orient themselves around him. And beside him, holding his arm with practiced ease, was Catherine Volkov. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers were beautiful, cold and perfect and completely inaccessible. Blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, a dress that probably cost more than Alara's father's debt, diamonds at her throat that caught the light with every breath. She smiled at Victor with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her right to stand beside powerful men. Alara felt something twist in her chest. This was Victor's future. This elegant, perfect woman who fit seamlessly into his world, not a broken waitress from Queens who told stories in the dark. She was refilling her tray at the service station when the lights dimmed slightly. The crowd quieted. Victor stepped onto a small raised platform at one end of the ballroom, Catherine still at his side. "Thank you all for coming," Victor's voice carried across the room with easy authority. "Tonight marks a significant moment for our organization. As many of you know, relations with the Volkov family have been strained in recent months. Tonight, we put those tensions to rest." He turned to Catherine, taking her hand. "Catherine has agreed to become my wife. Our union will strengthen both our families and bring stability to territories that have seen too much conflict. I hope you'll join me in celebrating this alliance." The crowd erupted in applause. Alara watched Catherine lean in to kiss Victor's cheek, watched him smile in return with an expression that looked genuine enough to fool anyone who didn't know what his real smiles looked like. She watched and felt her heart crack cleanly in two. Then the front doors exploded inward. The wood splintered inward with a sound like bones breaking. Armed men poured through the ruined entrance, 6, 8, maybe 10 of them, all wearing black tactical gear and carrying weapons that looked military grade. The ballroom erupted into chaos instantly. Women screamed, men shouted, champagne flutes shattered against marble as people dove for cover. Alara's tray hit the floor. She dropped behind a marble column, her heart trying to punch through her ribcage, watching the scene unfold with the detached clarity that sometimes comes with terror. Victor moved first. He shoved Catherine behind him and pulled a gun from somewhere inside his tuxedo jacket, smooth and practiced, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. 3 of his security team materialized from the crowd, weapons already drawn, forming a protective barrier around him. "Nobody move!" One of the attackers, tall, scarred, with the dead eyes of someone who'd stopped caring about consequences, raised his weapon. "This is a message from the Bratva. You don't negotiate with our operations, you don't interfere with our shipments, and you definitely don't—" His words cut off as one of Victor's security team put a bullet through his shoulder. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire cracked through the air like thunder. Alara pressed herself against the column, making herself as small as possible, covering her head with her arms like that would somehow stop bullets. Around her, Manhattan's criminal elite scattered like roaches when the lights came on, diving under tables, crawling toward exits, trampling over each other in their desperation to escape. She caught glimpses of the fight through the chaos. Victor firing with calm precision, taking down one attacker, then another. his security team moving in coordinated patterns, protecting him and Catherine both. Gregor Volkov, a bull of a man with silver hair, roaring something in Russian and pulling his own weapon. Blood on the marble floors spreading in dark pools that reflected the chandelier light. One of the attackers broke through Victor's defensive line, young, maybe 25, with wild eyes and shaking hands. He raised his weapon toward Victor's back, and Alara watched it happen in slow motion, the finger tightening on the trigger, Victor completely unaware, focused on threats coming from the front. She didn't think, just moved. Alara grabbed a champagne bottle from the floor and ran. Her server's uniform made her invisible, just another terrified woman in the chaos. The attacker didn't see her coming until she smashed the bottle across the back of his head. Glass shattered. He staggered, spinning toward her, and for one frozen second, Alara saw her own death in his eyes. Then Victor was there, putting 3 bullets in the man's chest before he could pull the trigger. The attacker dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Victor's head whipped toward Alara, his dark eyes going wide with recognition and something that might have been terror. "What the fuck are you doing here?" "Saving your life, apparently." "Get down!" Victor tackled her to the floor as bullets chewed through the space where her head had been. They hit the marble hard enough to knock the air from her lungs, Victor covering her body with his own, returning fire over her shoulder at targets she couldn't see. "Stay down," he hissed in her ear. "Don't move! Don't!" A new sound cut through the gunfire. Not bullets, something else. Something that made the hair on the back of Alara's neck stand up in primal recognition of wrongness. Victor went rigid above her. "No, no, no, no!" "What's wrong?" "The sun," Victor's voice cracked with panic. "It's setting. I thought we had more time. The gala was supposed to end before—" Understanding hit Alara like cold water. Sunset, the transformation. And they were in a room full of witnesses who absolutely could not see what Victor became. "You need to leave," she said. "Now. Get somewhere private before—" "I can't!" Victor's hands were already shaking, his breathing going ragged. "There's no time, and if I move, you're exposed, and—" Another wave of attackers came through a side entrance. Victor fired until his gun clicked empty, then threw it aside and pulled a knife from somewhere. He killed a man with it, quick and brutal and efficient. Then another, his movements getting jerky and uncoordinated as the transformation started in earnest. Alara watched shadows begin gathering around him like living things. Watched his hands spasm and elongate, claws starting to push through human fingernails. Watched the careful mask he always wore start cracking as the thing underneath fought its way to the surface. "Victor, I'm sorry." His voice was changing, getting rougher, layered with something that wasn't quite human. "I'm so sorry. You shouldn't have to see." The last of the attackers, 3 of them, regrouping near the main entrance, raised their weapons toward Victor's exposed back. Alara saw it happening, saw they had maybe 2 seconds before bullets ended everything, and made a choice. She grabbed Victor's face in both hands and kissed him, hard and desperate and completely visible to the entire ballroom. "I love you," she said against his mouth. "Whatever happens, whatever you become, I love you." Victor's eyes, already starting to bleed to black, went wide. "Alara!" The transformation hit like a freight train. Victor's body convulsed, shadows exploding outward in a wave that knocked Alara backward. She hit the floor hard, vision sparking, and when she looked up, the man she loved was gone. The creature that stood in his place was nightmare-made flesh, 7 feet of shadow and muscle and wrongness, with claws that could disembowel a man and teeth that belonged in deep-sea trenches. It threw back its head and roared, a sound that shook the chandeliers and made every primitive instinct in Alara's brain scream run. The ballroom went silent. Every person still conscious and alive froze, staring at the monster that had been Victor Calderon. Then Catherine Volkov started screaming. The creature's head swiveled toward her, those black eyes focusing, and Alara saw the exact moment the remaining attackers realized they were no longer the most dangerous things in the room. They tried to run, tried to escape through the ruined entrance or the side doors or anywhere that wasn't here. The creature moved faster than anything that size should have been able to. It caught the first attacker before he made it 3 steps, claws tearing through tactical gear and flesh like they were tissue paper. Blood sprayed across the marble in arterial patterns. The man's scream cut off wet and final. The other two attackers opened fire, bullets punching into shadow flesh with sounds like rocks hitting mud. The creature barely noticed. It killed them both with the casual efficiency of someone swatting flies, then turned its attention to the ballroom full of terrified criminals. "Victor?" Alara's voice came out steady, despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Victor, that's enough. They're down. You won." The creature's head swiveled toward her. For a horrible second, she thought there was nothing human left behind those black eyes, that she was about to die the same way the attackers had. Then it made a sound, low and questioning and somehow achingly familiar. "It's me," Alara said quietly, pushing herself to her feet despite her screaming muscles. "It's Alara, remember? I tell you stories about monsters and the people who love them anyway." The creature took a step toward her. The entire ballroom tensed, expecting violence. Instead, it lowered itself down, making itself smaller, less threatening, and made another sound. This one almost like a whimper. Alara crossed the distance between them on shaking legs, every nerve ending screaming at her to run. She reached out and touched the creature's face, Victor's face, however transformed, feeling shadow flesh that was simultaneously solid and insubstantial under her palm. "I see you," she whispered. "Both of you, monster and man, and I'm not afraid." The creature's eyes closed. When they opened again, something wet tracked down its face. Tears, Alara realized. It was crying. Behind her someone, Gregor Volkov, she thought, said in a voice rough with shock, "What is this? What is he?" Alara turned to face the room full of Manhattan's criminal elite. They stared back at her with expressions ranging from horror to fascination to calculation. Catherine had stopped screaming but looked like she might start again at any moment. Victor's security team stood frozen, unsure whether to protect their transformed boss or run for their lives. And standing near the destroyed entrance, having arrived sometime during the chaos, was an old man in a priest's collar. He looked at the creature that was Victor Calderon, with eyes that held no surprise at all. "The Calderon curse," the old man said, his voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. 6 generations. I wondered if this one would finally break it. "Who the hell are you?" Gregor demanded. "Father Mikhail. I served Victor's grandfather before he died. I'm familiar with the family's particular burden." The priest moved forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. "The curse was laid by a woman named Katerina Volkov, actually. Perhaps you've heard of her, Gregor? Your great-great-grandmother? The one your family doesn't like to mention?" Gregor's face went through several interesting color changes. "That's a myth, a story to scare children." "Is it? Because I'm looking at living proof that it's very real." Father Mikhail stopped a respectful distance from the creature. "Katerina was a witch, the real kind, not the fairy tale version. She laid a curse on the Calderon line after Victor's ancestor betrayed her daughter. Every male Calderon since has carried the burden. Human by day, monster by night, torn between two forms that can never fully integrate." "There has to be a way to break it," Alara said. Her hand was still on the creature's face, feeling it lean into her touch. "Curses always have conditions." "They do. This one requires something most people aren't capable of." Father Mikhail met Alara's eyes. "True love. Not the fairy tale kind where everything is easy. Real love that sees both halves and chooses them anyway. Love that's tested by fire and doesn't break." "I choose him," Alara said immediately. "Both versions. I already told him that." "Choosing isn't enough. You have to prove it, in front of witnesses. You have to stand before the world and declare that you see what he is, monster included, and love him regardless. That you bind yourself to him knowing exactly what that means." The creature made a sound like broken glass. Its massive head shook back and forth, emphatic in denial. "Victor says no," Alara translated, somehow understanding the creature's sounds. "He doesn't want me to risk it. Doesn't want me bound to. I don't care what he wants." Alara moved to stand in front of the creature, forcing it to look at her. "You don't get to make this decision for me. You don't get to protect me from my own choices." The creature's claws came up, gesturing frantically. More sounds that Alara's heart translated, even if her brain couldn't fully process them. "You deserve better. You should run. I'm a monster who will destroy you." "Yeah, you probably will. We'll probably destroy each other in a dozen different ways." Elara grabbed one massive clawed hand in both of hers, but I'd rather have that than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. The girl's insane, someone in the crowd muttered. The girl's in love, Father Mikhail corrected. There's often not much difference. He turned to address the ballroom. You've all seen what Victor Calderon truly is. You've seen the curse that's driven his family for generations, and now you'll witness either its breaking or its continuation. Elara Whitmore. Wait. Catherine's voice cut through the priest's words. She stepped forward, her perfect composure cracked but still mostly intact. I'm his fiancée. If anyone's going to break this curse, you're a strategic alliance who screamed when you saw his true form, Elara said flatly. I'm the woman who's been sitting with him through every transformation for weeks. Who's held him while he changed and told him stories and loved him anyway? There's no competition here. Catherine's mouth opened and closed. Then she looked at her father, at the creature, at the crowd of witnesses. I can't marry that. I won't. Then the engagement is dissolved, Gregor said heavily. He looked at Victor, the monster version, with something almost like pity. I had no idea. The Volkov curse come home to roost. Your great-great-grandmother would have appreciated the irony. Someone better appreciate something fast. Anna's voice came from near the service entrance. She stood with Sophie and several other women from the house, all of them armed with weapons they'd clearly stolen from fallen attackers. Because we've got NYPD sirens getting closer, and this is not a scene we want them arriving at. Father Mikhail spoke quickly. Elara Whitmore, do you stand before these witnesses and declare your love for Victor Calderon? Not just the man he appears by day, but the creature he becomes by night? Do you accept both halves, knowing they come as a package that cannot be separated? I do. And do you bind yourself to him willingly, with full understanding of what his world entails? The violence, the darkness, the constant danger? I do. Then speak the words that will either break 6 generations of suffering or condemn you both to share it. Tell him, tell everyone, exactly what he is to you. Elara looked up at the creature that was Victor, at the black eyes that held so much pain and hope and terror. She thought about the man who'd called her extraordinary, who'd listened to her stories like they mattered, who'd made her feel seen for the first time in years. She thought about the monster who'd cried when she touched him, who'd protected her even while transforming, who'd chosen to suffer alone rather than risk her safety. And she said the words that had been building in her chest for weeks. You're a monster. You're absolutely a monster. By day when you run a criminal empire built on human suffering, and by night when you transform into this. You're cruel and dangerous and morally compromised in ways I'm still learning to understand. You've done terrible things and will probably do more. You're trapped in a curse you never asked for, torn between forms that both hurt in different ways. And I love you. I love both of you. The man who drinks expensive bourbon and paces when he's thinking, the creature who curls around me protectively and cries when I touch him gently. You're not perfect, neither am I. But we're broken in compatible ways, and that's enough. That's more than enough. I choose you, both versions, forever, no matter what comes next. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to collapse the building. Then light exploded from the creature's chest. Not metaphorical light, actual, blinding, brilliant light that made everyone in the ballroom throw up their hands to shield their eyes. Elara felt heat wash over her, felt the creature's hand spasm in hers, heard a roar that might have been pain or triumph, or both. When the light faded, Victor Calderon stood in front of her. Human. Completely human. His tuxedo was shredded from the transformation, blood and shadow residue covering his skin, but his eyes were normal brown and his hands were normal size, and there wasn't a trace of the creature left anywhere visible. He stared at Elara like she'd performed a magic trick. Did that actually? The curse is broken, Father Mikhail said, his voice thick with emotion. 6 generations, finally broken by someone brave enough to see the whole truth and love it anyway. Victor grabbed Elara and kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. She kissed him back, tasting blood and shadows and something that might have been tears, aware they were doing this in front of a ballroom full of criminals and the woman who'd been his fiancée 10 minutes ago. When they broke apart, Victor said, "You're insane. You realize that, right?" You just bound yourself to the head of a criminal organization in front of everyone who matters in the underworld. There's no taking that back. I don't want to take it back. I can't offer you a normal life, can't promise safety or simplicity or anything resembling conventional happiness. Good, because I'd be terrible at conventional anyway. Someone in the crowd, Alara thought it might be Gregor, started laughing. Then others joined in, the sound building until the entire ballroom was filled with the slightly hysterical laughter of people who'd just watched something impossible happen. Well, Catherine said, smoothing her dress with shaking hands, this is certainly the most memorable engagement party I've ever attended, even if it's not my engagement anymore. I'll compensate your family for the dissolved alliance, Victor said, his arm still wrapped around Alara. Name the terms. Actually, Gregor stepped forward, his expression calculating. I think this works better. A curse broken is more powerful than a simple alliance. The other families will think twice before moving against someone who can accomplish the impossible. He extended his hand to Victor. The Volkovs and the Calderones remain allied, just through mutual respect rather than marriage. Victor shook his hand, still looking slightly dazed. I appreciate that. Plus, your girl has excellent instincts. She saved your life tonight. That's worth more than a strategic marriage. Gregor turned to Alara. You ever decide you want to work in this business for real? I'll pay you double whatever he does. She's not working for anyone, Victor said flatly. She's... What are you exactly? Yours, Alara said simply. If you'll have me... That's not even a question. Victor pulled her closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. But you need to understand what you just signed up for. My world is violence and darkness. People will try to hurt you to get to me. You'll be a target for the rest of your life. And I can't guarantee I won't fall back into some version of being a monster, curse or no curse. This isn't a fairy tale ending. I know. I'm good with that. You shouldn't be good with that. You should be demanding better. Yeah, well, I've learned that better is subjective, and right now, this... She gestured between them at the ballroom full of chaos, at the impossible thing they'd just accomplished. This feels pretty damn good. The sirens were getting louder. Anna appeared at Victor's elbow. We need to clear out, now. My people are scrubbing the security footage, but we've got maybe 5 minutes before NYPD arrives. Victor nodded, suddenly all business. Get everyone out through the service exits. Make sure the bodies are accounted for. The attackers were Bratva. We'll send them back as a message. Gregor, you and your people good to handle the authorities? We've got our story straight. Attempted robbery. Your security team defended the guests. The perpetrators fled. Standard narrative. Gregor was already moving toward the exit, Catherine and his security team following. Calderon, congratulations on breaking your curse. Try not to do anything else impossible tonight. My heart can't take it. The ballroom emptied rapidly, criminals and witnesses scattering like they'd never been there. Within minutes, only Alara, Victor, Anna, and the priest remained among the bodies and broken glass. You should go too, Victor said to Father Mikhail, before the police arrive and start asking uncomfortable questions about why a priest was at a criminal's engagement party. I'll go. But first, the old man reached into his robe and pulled out a small leather book, pressing it into Victor's hands. This belonged to your grandfather. It has information about the curse, about Katerina Volkov, about your family's history. He wanted you to have it if the curse ever broke. I've been carrying it for 15 years, waiting. Victor took the book with hands that weren't quite steady. Thank you for coming. For bearing witness to love winning for once? Father Mikhail smiled. It's rare in this world. Worth celebrating. He turned to Alara. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, or the most foolish. Possibly both. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm starting to think it's my defining characteristic. The priest laughed and left through the service entrance, his robe swishing against the marble floors. Anna checked her watch. 3 minutes. Victor, you need to change clothes. Alara, you're coming with me. We need to get you somewhere the police won't find you. Wait, where am I going? Alara asked as Anna grabbed her arm. To Victor's private rooms. The real ones, not the ones he uses for business. You're not sleeping in the third-floor guest quarters anymore. Not after what you just did. Anna was already pulling her toward a hidden door in the ballroom's paneling. Come on, move! Victor caught Alara's other hand before Anna could drag her away completely. I'll find you. As soon as I deal with the police and the cleanup, don't go anywhere. Where would I go? I just publicly declared my love for you in front of Manhattan's entire criminal elite. I'm kind of committed at this point. He kissed her again, quick and fierce. I love you, even though it's a disaster, even though we're both probably insane. Especially because we're both insane, Alara corrected. Then Anna was pulling her through the hidden door, down a narrow servants' corridor, upstairs that twisted in ways that made no architectural sense. They emerged in a part of the mansion Alara had never seen, quieter, more private, decorated with actual warmth instead of the cold elegance of the public spaces. These are Victor's personal quarters, Anna explained, pushing open a heavy wooden door. No one comes here without his explicit permission. You'll be safe. The rooms beyond were beautiful, lived-in beautiful, not museum beautiful. Books everywhere, a half-finished chess game on a side table, artwork that looked chosen for personal meaning rather than investment value. It felt like Victor in a way the rest of the mansion never had. Get some sleep, Anna said. Or try to. It's been a hell of a night. Anna, the women downstairs, Sophie and the others, what happens to them now? Anna's expression softened. I don't know. That's between you and Victor. But if you're serious about being his partner, really his partner, not just the woman he keeps in his rooms, you'll have the power to change things. Use it well. She left, closing the door with a soft click. Alara stood in the center of Victor's private space, still wearing a shredded server's uniform, covered in blood and champagne and the residue of impossible things, and tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. She'd watched a gala turn into a war zone, had saved Victor's life, had watched him transform in front of witnesses who absolutely shouldn't have seen, had broken a sixth-generation curse through sheer stubborn love, had dissolved his engagement and claimed him publicly in the most dramatic way possible. She should be terrified, should be questioning every choice that led to this moment. Instead, she felt strangely calm, settled almost, like pieces of herself that had been scattered were finally clicking into place. A shower presented itself as a good next step. Alara found the bathroom, marble and brass and somehow still masculine, and stood underwater hot enough to hurt, washing away the night's evidence. She found one of Victor's shirts in a closet and put it on, the fabric hanging to her knees, smelling like him. Then she curled up in his bed and waited. Victor found her there maybe an hour later. He looked exhausted, still wearing the ruined tuxedo, dried blood in his hair. But his eyes were clear and human and full of something that made Alara's chest ache. The police are gone. The bodies are handled. The story is contained. He sat on the edge of the bed, reaching out to touch her face like he needed to confirm she was real. Gregor's already spreading word about what happened. By morning, every family in the city will know the Calderon curse is broken and that you're the one who did it. Is that good or bad? Both. You're protected now. Anyone who hurts you knows they're starting a war with me and the Volkovs both. But you're also a target. People will want to use you to get to me. Test whether breaking the curse made me weaker or stronger. And did it? Make you weaker? Victor was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet. The curse was part of me for so long, I'm not sure who I am without it. But I know I feel more human than I have in years. That has to count for something. Come here. Alara pulled him down beside her, wrapping herself around him despite the dried blood and torn fabric. We'll figure it out, together. You keep saying that, together, like it's simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. She kissed his jaw, his throat, the pulse point that beat steady and human. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just details. Victor laughed, broken and relieved and maybe a little bit hopeful. You're going to turn my entire world upside down, aren't you? Absolutely. Starting with the women downstairs. We're going to fix that situation. Alara? I'm serious, Victor. I meant what I said about being your partner. That means I get a say in how things work. And I say we stop treating people like commodities. That's not how this world works. Then we change how this world works. You just broke a sixth-generation curse. I think we can handle reforming your business practices. Victor stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. Then he started laughing. Real laughter. the kind she'd only heard a few times before. "You're absolutely insane." "Yeah, we've established that. Are you in or not?" He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "I'm in. For all of it. The insanity, the reforms, the impossible task of being better than what I was raised to be. All of it." They stayed like that as night deepened outside the windows, two broken people choosing each other despite every rational reason not to. Somewhere in the mansion, the cleanup continued. Somewhere in the city, word was spreading about the impossible thing that had happened at Victor Calderon's engagement party. Somewhere people were already planning how to exploit or attack or capitalize on the night's events. But in Victor's private rooms, for a few stolen hours, none of that mattered. There was just Alara and Victor, and the quiet certainty that they'd found something worth fighting for, even if that fight would probably destroy them both in the end. Even if they were trading one kind of curse for another. Even if happy endings were for other people, and all they got was survival in each other. It was enough. For now, for tonight, for this moment, it was more than enough. "I've known since the second meeting," Victor continued, his voice cutting through the gunfire with eerie calm. "You think I don't vet everyone who gets close to me? The engagement was bait, Gregor, and you took it exactly like I knew you would." Gregor's face contorted with rage. "Kill him! Kill them all!" The assault intensified. Victor's security was good, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Bodies dropped on both sides. Men in tuxedos and tactical gear alike crumpling to the marble floor. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and copper. Alara watched it unfold from her position against the wall, paralyzed by the sheer violence. This was Victor's world without the carefully maintained veneer. Raw and brutal and completely unforgiving. Then she saw the shooter. One of Gregor's men had circled around, positioning himself behind an overturned table with a clear line of sight to Victor's back. Victor was focused on the main assault, directing his team, completely unaware of the threat behind him. Alara didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed a champagne bottle from a fallen tray and ran, her server's uniform making her invisible in the chaos. The shooter had his finger on the trigger when Alara slammed the bottle against the back of his skull. It didn't shatter like in movies, just made a sick thud that sent the man sprawling forward. The movement caught Victor's attention. He turned, saw the unconscious shooter, saw Alara standing there with a champagne bottle and shaking hands, and something in his expression shifted. "Get down!" he shouted. But it was too late. Another shooter had spotted her. Alara saw the gun swing toward her, saw the finger tighten on the trigger, and knew with absolute certainty she was about to die. Victor moved impossibly fast, his body a blur as he threw himself between Alara and the shooter. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the floor hard, blood spreading across his white shirt in a bloom of crimson. "No!" Alara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands going to the wound automatically. "No, no, no, Victor, stay with me. You shouldn't be here," he gasped. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm an idiot who can't let go even when I should." "Press down on this, keep pressure." Around them the battle raged, but something was changing. Victor's security had regrouped, pushing Gregor's men back toward the shattered doors. The tide was turning. And then the sun set. Alara felt it before she saw it. The way Victor's body went rigid beneath her hands, his eyes going wide with something like panic. "No," he whispered. "Not now, not here. Alara, you need to run. I'm not leaving you. You don't understand. The change, it's starting, and there are too many people." His voice broke off in a sound that was half groan, half growl. "I can't control it in combat. I'll kill everyone, including you." Shadows were already gathering around him, darker than the smoke filling the ballroom, moving with purpose instead of drifting. The temperature dropped so fast, Alara could see her breath. Victor's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with crushing strength. "Run, please! I'm begging you!" The transformation hit like a wave. Victor's body convulsed, bones cracking and reforming, skin rippling as it darkened to living shadow. Alara scrambled backward but didn't run, watching in horror and fascination as the man she loved twisted into something else entirely. The shadow creature that emerged was different from the one she'd seen in their private room. This one was larger, more aggressive, its black eyes burning with an intelligence that felt predatory rather than protective. It rose to its full height, easily 8 feet tall now, and roared with a sound that made the remaining chandelier shake. The ballroom went silent. Everyone, Victor's people and Gregor's alike, stopped fighting to stare at the monster that had appeared in their midst. Gregor recovered first. "What the hell is that?" "That," Catherine said, her voice shaking, "is the Calderon curse. The real reason his family has held power for 6 generations. The thing that makes them unkillable." The creature's head swung toward Gregor, lips pulling back from too many teeth. It took a step forward, and Gregor's men opened fire. Bullets punched through shadow flesh and came out the other side, doing no damage Alara could see. The creature just kept coming, moving with terrifying speed. It caught the first shooter by the throat, lifting him off the ground one-handed. The man's scream cut off with a wet crunch. The creature dropped the body and moved to the next target, shadow claws tearing through tactical vests like tissue paper. Gregor's assault team broke. They ran for the shattered doors, trampling over each other in their panic to escape. Gregor himself was backing away, his gun hanging forgotten in his hand, his face gray with terror. The creature stalked toward him with deliberate intent. This wasn't mindless violence, this was execution. "Victor, stop!" Alara's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't kill him. You're not a mindless monster. I know you're still in there." The creature paused, its head tilting toward her. Those black eyes fixed on Alara with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Maybe was terrifying, but she stood her ground. "I've seen you like this before," she said, walking slowly toward the creature even as every survival instinct screamed at her to run. "I've sat with you, talked to you. You've never hurt me. Don't start now by becoming exactly what they all think you are." The creature's claws flexed. Shadow roiled around its form like living smoke. Behind it, Gregor was crawling toward the exit, forgotten for the moment. "Please," Alara said, close enough now to touch it. "I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Don't let the curse win. Don't let it turn you into something you're not." The creature's hand shot out, and for a second Alara thought she'd miscalculated. That the thing wearing Victor's consciousness was too far gone to recognize her. Then those massive claws cupped her face with impossible gentleness, and the creature made a sound that was almost like a sob. "There you are," Alara whispered, leaning into the touch. "I see you. Both of you. The man and the monster. And I'm not afraid." The creature pulled back, its form shuddering. When it looked at her again, something in those black eyes had shifted. More human. More Victor. Behind them, Catherine's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "The curse can be broken." Every head in the ballroom turned toward her. She stood amid the wreckage and bodies, her perfect composure shattered, but her voice steady. "The Calderon curse," she continued. "I researched it when my father first proposed the alliance. It's been in your family for 6 generations. A bargain made for power and immortality that chained every male heir to darkness. But there's a release clause. There's always a release clause." The creature, Victor, made a questioning sound. "True love," Catherine said, and laughed bitterly. "Of course it's true love. It's always true love in these old contracts. Someone has to accept both halves completely. See you as human, regardless of form. Choose you freely, despite knowing what you are." Her eyes found Alara, which I'm guessing she's already done. "I don't understand," Alara said. "The curse splits you," Catherine addressed Victor directly. "Man by day, monster by night, never whole. But if someone loves both versions, really loves them, not just tolerates them, the split heals. You become one being instead of 2 warring halves." "How do you know this?" Victor's voice came from the creature's mouth, distorted but recognizable. "Because my family has been trying to figure out how to kill you for 3 generations. We found the original contract in old archives. The curse maker built in a failsafe because even demonic bargains have rules." Catherine's expression was unreadable. "I was supposed to marry you, get close enough to learn if the rumors about the curse were true, then help my father destroy you. But you knew that from the start." "Yes." "And you were going to use me to draw him out, let him think he had the upper hand, then crush him publicly." "Yes." "Except you didn't count on her." Catherine gestured to Alara. "The broken waitress from Queens who somehow did what 6 generations of Calderons couldn't manage. She broke your curse just by giving a damn." "I haven't broken anything," Alara protested. "He's still—" She gestured at the shadow creature. Because he hasn't accepted it yet. Because he's spent his whole life believing he's two separate things. The man who's worth saving and the monster that deserves to be trapped. But if he accepts that they're both him, both equally real, both equally deserving of love, Catherine stopped. Well, the contract says the curse shatters. The creature stood frozen, processing. Around the ballroom, the remaining guests and security personnel watched in silence. This had stopped being a gang war and become something else entirely, something stranger and more significant. Elara, Victor's voice still distorted but growing clearer. You don't have to do this. The curse doesn't just break. It has consequences. The power I have, the control, it all comes from the darkness. Without it, I'm just human, Elara finished. You'd be just human, mortal and vulnerable and ordinary. Is that what scares you? The creature flinched. You've been hiding behind the curse for so long, using it as an excuse for why you can't have normal things. Love, connection, actual happiness. But the truth is you're just afraid. Afraid that without the monster, you're not special, not worthy, not enough. And if I'm not? The question came out raw. If I break the curse and you realize I'm nothing without it, then I'll love you anyway. Because that's what love is. It's not about power or curses or being special. It's about choosing someone despite their flaws. Because of their flaws. Knowing they're just as broken and scared as you are and deciding that's okay. Elara stepped closer, placing both hands on the creature's chest where a human heart would be. I was married to a man who left me because I couldn't give him the fantasy family he wanted, who measured my worth by my ability to perform one biological function. And I spent years believing he was right, that I was less than, worthless. You're not. I know that now. Because you taught me. You looked at me, really looked, and saw someone worth listening to, worth protecting, worth loving. Not despite being broken, but because being broken meant I understood what it felt like. The creature's form shuddered. Shadows rippled and contracted. So here's what I'm saying, Elara continued. I choose you. Both versions. The crime lord and the monster and whatever you are without the curse. I choose the man who threatened to gut people for crossing his ethical lines. I choose the creature who cried when I stayed through the transformation. I choose all of it, all of you, completely. Even knowing what I've done, what I am, I know exactly what you are. A man who maintains a criminal empire built on exploitation, who sells people and moves drugs and profits from suffering, who's also created rules to minimize harm and protected women from worse fates, and struggled every single day with the weight of impossible choices. Elara's voice cracked. You're not good, but you're not pure evil either. You're complicated and flawed and trying your best in a situation that doesn't have right answers. And I love you anyway. The creature's claws came up to cover her hands. I love you too. Both the man and the monster love you more than anything else in this broken world. Then let it go. Let the curse go. Be whole instead of divided. Trust that you're enough without it. What if I'm not? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what love means. We stop doing this alone. The creature closed its black eyes. When it spoke, Victor's voice came through clear and strong. I accept it. All of it. The darkness and the light. The man I pretend to be during the day and the monster I actually am at night. It's all me. It's all real. And she loves it anyway. I accept that. I accept myself. The change was instantaneous and catastrophic. Light exploded from the creature's form. Not warm golden light, but cold, piercing white that turned the ballroom into a photographic negative. Elara stumbled backward, shielding her eyes, as the light grew brighter and brighter until it felt like staring into the sun. Then it collapsed inward, sucking back into the creature's body in a rush of displaced air that knocked everyone off their feet. When Elara's vision cleared, Victor stood where the creature had been. Just Victor. Human and whole. Wearing the remains of his tuxedo, blood still staining his shoulder from the bullet wound. But his eyes were different. Still dark brown, but somehow clearer, like he was seeing the world in focus for the first time. It's gone, he said, his voice filled with wonder and terror. I can feel it. The curse, the darkness, the split, it's completely gone. How do you feel? Elara asked. Terrified. Relieved. Human in a way I haven't been since I was a child. Like I'm fully present instead of fighting myself every second. He looked at his hands, turning them over. I don't know how to be just one thing instead of two. You'll learn. We both will. Victor pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Nobody deserves anybody. We just choose each other and hope it's enough. They stayed like that while the ballroom slowly came back to life around them. Catherine had disappeared, likely slipping away while everyone's attention was on the transformation. Her father's men were either dead or fled. The guests who remained looked shell-shocked, processing what they'd just witnessed. Anna appeared from somewhere, her practical nature kicking in immediately. We need to get that shoulder treated and clear the bodies, and figure out what to tell the authorities when they show up asking about gunfire in an Upper East Side mansion. Let them come, Victor said. I'm done hiding. You're also done being unkillable, Anna pointed out. That bullet in your shoulder? It would have healed overnight before. Now you're just a man who needs actual medical attention. The words settled over the room like snow. Victor Calderon, Manhattan's most feared crime lord, the unkillable monster who'd controlled the underworld for a decade, was mortal now. Vulnerable. Human. His empire would eat him alive. Over the next 3 days, that's exactly what almost happened. Word spread through the criminal underground that Victor had lost his curse, that he was just a man now instead of something other. Rivals started circling immediately, old enemies and ambitious subordinates alike, all sensing weakness. Victor's security team was loyal, but loyalty only went so far when the person you were protecting could actually die now. His organization started fracturing as key players calculated their odds of taking over versus staying under his command. Through it all, Victor refused to hide. He walked through his empire with his head high, Elara at his side, and dared anyone to make a move. You realize this is insane, Elara said after the fifth tense meeting, where underbosses tested whether Victor would back down without his monster to enforce his will. Probably. But I'm not going back, not to the curse, not to being split in half, not to any of it. Victor poured bourbon into 2 glasses. If I lose everything because of it, at least I'll lose it as a whole person. What about the women downstairs, Sophie and the others? What happens to them if your organization collapses? Victor's jaw clenched. I've been thinking about that. About a lot of things, actually. Without the curse driving me, some of what I've done feels... He stopped, searching for words. Less necessary. More like choices I made because I could, not because I had to. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to change. Not all at once. That would destabilize everything, and people would die. But gradually. Find legitimate businesses for the illegitimate operations. Release the women who want to leave. Actually become the person you seem to think I can be. That's a pretty big shift from I am what I am, take it or leave it. Yeah, well, losing the curse gave me perspective. Turns out when you're not fighting yourself every second, you have energy left over to actually evaluate whether the things you're doing make sense. Victor handed her a glass. I'm not going to transform overnight into some kind of humanitarian, but I can stop being actively evil. That's a start. It took 6 months to stabilize the empire after the gala. 6 months of tense negotiations and strategic eliminations and carefully managed transitions. Victor proved that even without supernatural power, he was still dangerous. His mind was sharp, his network extensive, and his willingness to be ruthless when necessary hadn't diminished with the curse. But things did change. Slowly. Almost imperceptibly at first. The women in the basement were offered choices. Stay and work in legitimate positions with actual wages, or leave with enough money to start over somewhere else. Sophie chose to leave, heading to California with a check that would cover college tuition. She hugged Elara on her way out, whispering, "Thank you for showing us we could be more than furniture." The trafficking operations were wound down, transitioned to legitimate employment agencies that still made money but didn't destroy lives in the process. The drug trade proved harder to extract from, but Victor started insisting on cleaner products and safer distribution, minimizing the body count even if he couldn't eliminate it entirely. And Elara stayed through all of it. She moved out of the room that had been her prison and into Victor's actual quarters, a suite that took up half the mansion's top floor. They navigated learning to be together without the structure of their nightly storytelling sessions, figuring out what their relationship looked like in daylight. It wasn't easy. Victor struggled with being mortal, with the loss of power that had defined him for decades. Alara struggled with the guilt of loving someone who still profited from darkness, even if he was trying to minimize it. They fought viciously and made up desperately and slowly built something that looked almost like a real partnership. 8 months after the gala, Victor called Alara into his study. He looked nervous in a way she rarely saw anymore, his fingers tapping against his desk in an anxious rhythm. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you respond. Okay? I'm stepping down from running the organization. I'm handing control to Marcus Volkov, Gregor's nephew, actually a decent guy who wants to legitimize the family business. I've verified his intentions, set up oversight, made sure the protections we've built will stay in place." Alara sat down slowly. "Why?" "Because I can't keep doing this. Running an empire, even a changing one, while trying to build an actual life with you. The two things pull in opposite directions, and I'm choosing you." "Victor, I know what you're going to say. That I don't have to give up everything, that we can make it work. But I don't want to make it work. I want to actually be present. I want to wake up in the morning without calculating whether someone's going to try to kill me that day. I want—" He stopped, his voice rough. "I want to be boring with you, domestic, normal." "You'll hate it," Alara said. "Within a month you'll be climbing the walls from boredom." "Maybe. Probably. But at least I'll be climbing those walls as myself instead of as the role everyone expects me to play." "What will you do?" "I don't know. Figure it out as I go. Maybe that's the point. Actually choosing my life instead of inheriting it or being forced into it by a curse." Victor came around the desk, kneeling in front of her chair. "But I know I want to do it with you, if you'll have me." He pulled out a ring, not the massive diamond he'd given Catherine for show, but something simpler, a band of twisted gold with a single small stone that caught the light. "This isn't strategic," Victor said. "It's not about alliances or appearances or what makes sense for business. This is me asking you to build a life together. Boring, domestic, probably messy. Will you marry me?" Alara looked at the ring, at Victor's face, at the man who'd gone from crime lord to cursed creature to just himself, flawed and trying and offering her the most ordinary thing in the world, a future. "Yes," she said, "but on one condition. Anything. We do something with all this money you've accumulated. Something that actually helps people instead of just minimizing harm. A foundation, maybe. For women leaving bad situations. For families crushed by debt they can't pay." Victor laughed, the sound lighter than she'd ever heard it. "You want to turn blood money into charity? I want to make something good out of all the ugly we've lived through, both of us." "Is that too much to ask?" "No, it's perfect. You're perfect. I'm really not. I'm broken and complicated and probably making a huge mistake marrying a former crime lord. Good thing I'm broken and complicated too. We match." They were married a month later in a small ceremony that would have been unremarkable except for the guest list. Anna served as Alara's witness, looking proud in a way that made Alara's chest ache. Riley came from NYU, crying through the whole ceremony and whispering to Alara afterward that she'd known her sister would find something better than their father's disappointment. Thomas Whitmore didn't attend. Alara had sent him an invitation anyway, not because she wanted him there, but because not sending one felt like letting him win. He never responded. 6 months later, she heard through Anna that he'd died. Liver failure from drinking himself into oblivion after losing his last cent at a poker table in Atlantic City. Alara felt nothing when she heard the news. Not grief or relief or vindication. Just nothing. The man who'd sold her had stopped mattering somewhere along the way. The foundation launched a year after the wedding. They called it Second Chances, which was on the nose but accurate. It provided housing for women escaping trafficking situations, legal help for families drowning in debt, and grants for people who just needed a hand up instead of a hand out. Alara ran it with the same intensity she'd once brought to telling stories in the dark. She knew these women, knew what it felt like to be measured and discarded, to be treated as less than, to survive by any means necessary. She built a place where they could be whole instead of broken, where their past didn't define their future. Victor helped in the background, using his connections and resources without putting his name on anything. He seemed content with that, being support instead of the center, building something good instead of just maintaining something less evil than it could be. They settled into a life that was shockingly normal, a brownstone in Brooklyn instead of the mansion. Dinners cooked at home instead of prepared by staff. Movie nights and grocery shopping and all the mundane minutiae of existence that had seemed impossible a year earlier. And at night, when Alara curled against Victor in their too small bed, she sometimes thought about the shadow creature that used to consume him, about the curse that had defined 6 generations, about the impossible journey from that first terrified night in the darkened room to here. "Do you miss it?" she asked one evening, her head on his chest, listening to his very human heartbeat. The curse? The power? The invincibility? Being something more than just a man? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, when I read about violence in neighborhoods I used to control, when I see women in situations I could have prevented if I still had the organization, when I realize I'm actually going to age and die like everyone else. He pressed a kiss to her hair, but then I remember what it cost. Being split in half, fighting myself constantly, never being whole, and I think, this is better. Being ordinary with you is better than being extraordinary alone. We're not that ordinary. We run a charity funded by crime money and live in a brownstone that's nicer than most people will ever afford. Fine. We're ordinary adjacent. The point stands. 2 years after the gala, Alara got a phone call that changed everything again. "Ms. Calderon?" The voice was professional, female, vaguely familiar. "This is Dr. Martinez. I was your fertility specialist years ago, when you were trying to conceive with your ex-husband." Alara's stomach dropped. "I remember. Is something wrong?" "Actually, I'm calling with unusual news. There was an error in your original diagnosis, a misreading of your test results that wasn't caught until we recently digitized old records. You're not infertile, Ms. Calderon. You never were. Your ex-husband was." The words didn't make sense at first. Alara heard them, but they felt like they were in a foreign language her brain couldn't quite translate. "What?" "Marcus Whitmore was the one with the fertility issues, not you. Severe oligospermia, very low sperm count, near 0 actually. The odds of natural conception would have been astronomically low, but the error in documentation attributed it to you instead of him." Dr. Martinez's voice was professionally apologetic. "I'm calling because we're contacting all patients affected by this records error. We're prepared to offer compensation for any damages." Alara hung up. She sat on the couch in their living room, staring at the wall, processing. Marcus had left her because he thought she was broken, had made her believe she was defective, worthless, unable to fulfill her basic biological purpose. And the whole time it had been him. He was the one who couldn't have children. She should feel vindicated, relieved, something. Instead, she just felt tired. Victor found her there an hour later, still sitting in the same position. He didn't ask what was wrong, just sat beside her and waited. "I'm not infertile," Alara said finally. "I never was. The doctor screwed up the records. Marcus was the one who couldn't have kids." Victor absorbed that. "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. Angry that he made me believe I was broken when he was the one with the problem. Sad that I wasted years thinking I was worthless because of a medical error. Relieved that maybe I'm not as fundamentally damaged as I thought. You were never damaged. Error or not, you were always whole. Easy to say now, harder to believe when you've spent years being told otherwise." "Yeah, I know something about that." Victor pulled her against him. "The curse told me I was split, incomplete, half monster. Turns out I was always whole too. Just believed the wrong story about myself." They sat together as afternoon faded to evening, processing the weird ways life could circle back on itself. How the thing you thought defined you could turn out to be a lie. How you could build a whole identity around brokenness only to discover you were never broken at all. "Do you want kids?" Victor asked eventually. "Now that you know it's possible." Alara thought about it, really thought, instead of dismissing the question like she'd learned to do over the years. "Maybe. Someday. Not to prove anything, or because I'm supposed to, but because it might be nice." building something together that's just ours. Okay. Okay? That's it? No grand declarations about wanting a family or not wanting to disrupt our life. We'll figure it out. Same way we figured out everything else. Together, and messy, and probably imperfectly. Victor kissed her temple. That's the nice thing about not having a curse defining your future. You get to actually choose. 3 months later, Alara took a pregnancy test on a whim. The positive result felt surreal, like something that happened to other people, not broken waitresses from Queens who'd been deemed worthless. Except she wasn't that anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. She was Alara Calderon, wife of a former crime lord, director of a foundation that helped hundreds of women every year, a whole person who'd survived being sold, falling in love with a monster, and discovering that wholeness had been inside her all along. The baby arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, screaming indignantly at being thrust into the world. She was small and red and completely perfect in the way that new humans are. Victor held her with the careful terror of someone who'd never expected to have something so fragile depend on him. "She looks like you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She looks like an angry potato. All babies do. An angry potato who's going to grow up knowing she's wanted, knowing she's enough exactly as she is, never questioning her worth." Alara watched her husband, the man who'd been a crime lord and a monster and was now just a father holding his daughter, and felt something settle in her chest. Not happily ever after. Life was too complicated for that. But something close. They named her Hope, which was on the nose and probably setting her up for a lifetime of eye-rolling, but it felt right. She was proof that people could change, that curses could be broken, that love could exist in the wreckage of impossible situations and build something new. Riley visited from grad school, crying happy tears and demanding to be the favorite aunt. Anna brought gifts and advice and looked at Alara with something like maternal pride. Even some of the women from Second Chances came by, bringing clothes and toys and stories about how the foundation had changed their lives. Victor's old organization sent a baby gift too, an obscenely expensive bassinet from Marcus Volkov with a note that said, "To new beginnings and better legacies." Victor laughed when he read it, the sound lighter than Alara had ever heard. "We actually did it," he said that night, both of them exhausted as Hope screamed through her third diaper change of the hour. "Built something good out of all the ugly. We're still building it. This doesn't erase what came before." "No, but it proves what comes before doesn't have to define what comes after." Years passed. Hope grew into a stubborn, brilliant child who asked too many questions and took no prisoners. The foundation expanded, helping more women every year, doing the work of turning pain into purpose. Victor stayed mortal and ordinary and seemed genuinely content with both. And sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, Alara thought about that first terrifying evening when she'd been dragged to a mansion and offered to a mysterious guest. How she'd believed herself worthless, damaged, broken beyond repair. How a curse and a crime lord and an impossible love had taught her otherwise. She'd never thanked her father for selling her, would never forgive him for it, but she couldn't quite regret it either, because it had led here. To a life she could never have imagined. To wholeness she hadn't known was possible. To a man who'd been split between human and monster and learned to be both simultaneously. Who'd chosen love over power and ordinariness over invincibility, and her over everything else. To a daughter who would grow up knowing her worth was inherent, not conditional. Who would never be measured and found wanting because her parents understood that wholeness came from within, not from meeting someone else's requirements. To a foundation built on blood money that was slowly, imperfectly, washing that blood away by helping others find their own paths to freedom. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magic that fixed everything, no curse breaking that made the world perfect. Just two broken people who'd chosen each other and built something better than either had been alone. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.